Welcome to Contra Gentile, Season 2, Episode 21.
Well, if you didn't know the form of the heart, what you reaching up your ass?
I made bruschetta and it's really good.
Truth will essentially just reveal itself to the
Right.
audience.
Did you say that
Yeah.
I'm predisposed to like Sagittarius, man?
Quit being a fag.
That was much better than the first time. So what? Let's do a recap. So I stumbled through the little opening phrase horribly, asked if we should restart. We laughed about how we shouldn't restart awkwardly. And then I mixed gin and tonics, and the jigger we have dumps it if you're not careful. And I dumped gin all over my crotch. So now I have a gin loin for the duration of the episode. But anyway, yeah, we got gin and tonics tonight instead of wine. Cheers. See how strong they are. Oh, that's nice. Oh, it's so good. That's perfect.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So the secret here is I'm feeling what's the word? Self-loathing in a properly motivating way. Because I took my beard down just to see where my neckline was, and I looked like Porky the Pig, and I
would never say Porky the Pig. It just makes you look like a baby.
I know, but it wouldn't if I wasn't
Yeah.
overweight. Mm-hmm. Or and I'm not grossly overweight, and people, whenever I say that I'm overweight, people are like, no.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You'd see me with my shirt off. Like it's there's not a lot of definition going on. So the tonic water tonight is actually diet, and I didn't know they don't put sweeteners in it. And I know that we've talked about that twice now, but I thought the listeners might be interested in knowing that diet tonic water doesn't have any weird sweeteners in it like everything else does.
It's actually better like this.
With the
Yeah,
it's
it
dry
is.
and nice.
Yeah,
It's just so you're doing the Tanqueray for anybody that's interested. And there's Tanqueray is really dry and herbal, and then the diet tonic water is it quinine or quinine?
Quinine, I thought it was.
Quinine? I don't know. Quinine, whatever.
Yeah, somebody will correct us.
Yeah, somebody will if you had me on the episode, I could have told you how to pronounce that. Yes, I know. You're a genius. You have your degree in cocktail ingredient pronunciation, whatever. Your parents were cocktail masters, master mixologists who founded some school of mixology somewhere in the world, and I know that you know everything about it. Sorry I didn't say it right.
Wow, this goes well with beef jerky.
I know. I was walking around and again. So we do have grapes to make it for the wine, and beef jerky and almonds. So we're gonna walk out of here actually feeling good.
I'm not.
You already ate all.
I'm just stuffing my face right now.
I know. Yeah, this is much better momentum than the first time. So we should talk a little bit earlier. A little bit of banter first before we jump into this. It's winter now in Alaska. Overnight, suddenly, bam! It went from not winter to the roads look like the middle of winter now.
Yeah.
Because they iced over. And
I still haven't driven because I slept here all night.
oh my god, it's so you're driving home tonight.
Yeah.
You're gonna want to kill somebody though. Even it's dry asphalt. It's the first snow, but everybody's driving 50 miles an hour in trucks, and it's like normally it's bad. Normally there's the joke that everybody forgets how to drive once it snows. But this is way worse than
people in the ditch.
No, there's no one in ditches.
No, I'm saying it's worse than the people in the ditch.
Oh yeah. And I wonder if it's because it has to do with COVID anxiety. We're in an especially anxious time, and I wonder if everybody's just way overly cautious now. Yeah. Which I haven't seen a car in a ditch yet.
Yeah, good.
No, I saw one. I've seen one, which is shocking.
Yeah. No, I think my luck's gonna run out sometime because I still haven't ended up in a ditch.
I haven't either.
And I keep making fun of people that do end up in a ditch. So
You'll make fun of yourself though.
I know I would. Yeah. I really do think, because I was talking to somebody else that was in the Marines. I used to like drive in the deserts in the sand. He said it's pretty. He actually found driving in the sand to be much worse, like in a sandstorm and everything, than a snowstorm, because the way it gets caught in your tires really does make you slip pretty bad. Mm-hmm. But yeah, he was just discussing that. I think he's correct. That most people just end up in a ditch because of overcorrection. Yeah. And so whenever they feel a little bit of slippage, they yank the wheel and then they end up spinning out of control. And I think I just intuitively understood that when you begin to slip, you just kind of pump the brakes a little bit and continue the direction that the car is slipping towards, but just kind of do minor corrections until you straighten up again.
Sorry, I'm taking a picture of this because I have to.
Oh, okay.
I just. That was really a good choice.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it just goes too well with this damn.
G&T?
Yeah. Okay.
I'm going to save the rest for me. So, it's winter, and that's what we've said about it. Mm-hmm. You just want to jump it up? Mm-hmm. So, we tonight are covering Speechless, Controlling Words, Controlling Mind. Ding, ding.
Hold it up to the camera.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, Speechless, Controlling Words, Controlling Minds, by none other than the Daily Wire's Michael Knowles. Mm-hmm. Both of our personal favorite hosts, and the most, would you say, scholastically aligned?
Yeah.
Above all of them by quite a lot. Mm-hmm. What's the Italian thing? It has to be.
I think that's a huge part of it. Raised Catholic, he's Italian.
Just genetically.
Yeah.
Genetically scholastic.
You can't help it. You're just drawn to it.
But yeah, he's one of the hosts of the Daily Wire. That everybody knows who Ben Shapiro is, but like unless you listen to the Daily Wire, I think knowing the other hosts is a little more rare.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, he's the resident, like, I don't think he's a trad cath, because when I think of trad, I think like Walsh would be more like the trad cath as far as like how they're portrayed. And
yeah, definitely.
Like if I was,
he has that Anglo energy and that more puritanical twist. Mm-hmm. Too much of his ideas and everything. So I think when people normally say trad Catholic, they just mean Catholics before Vatican II, but after maybe around the 1800s, when much of like the Trentian, I guess, development took hold within most of the Anglo and the Saxon Catholic regions, even in the Latin one, but not as bad as it did in those areas. So, I think even recently Michael Knowles was talking about how he thinks that the time before Enlightenment, which you and I have said many times, was the more preferred state, at least ideologically, than what came afterwards. So, yeah, I think in many ways there's probably a little more alignment with his ideas with ours than it is probably with anybody else.
Because almost like 99% of the things he says, I totally agree with.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
And the 1% I don't, I think if I talked to him for 2 minutes, we'd.
Yes. Yeah.
No, he was promoting this book forever. Mm-hmm. Speechless. Ding ding. Mm-hmm. Controlling words, controlling minds.
Was that like dorky smile after he said
it? Every single time.
Yeah.
You've left me speechless. The camera thing where the camera would break. And
yeah.
Speechless, just to get to the limit. Mm-hmm. But yeah. So.
Yeah, so we decided to read it, and
I mean, 3 days.
Yeah. I mean, if anybody is interested in reading, it's actually quite an easy read. It's not too. Mm-hmm. It's not too heady, meaning that it isn't as if you're trying to figure anything out. He spells it out pretty well, and it's more of a historical argument than anything else.
Well, what I would say, and I thought about this a lot. So what did we expect it to be? When I agree with him on this is not. It's not that I don't agree with what he says. I actually agree with the thesis of the entire. Or I don't even want to say thesis, but the history is accurate. His perspective on all of it's correct. It's well written. It has a lot of lines in it that I really like.
Yeah.
They were very dramatic and theatrical and quippy and. But when I see Speechless controlling words, controlling minds, it's like it's less on the words part and more on the minds part.
On the what part?
It's less focuses on the words and more on the minds, like the controlling minds part. It's it's essentially it's a historical chronology of the way that language has been used to manipulate the masses since essentially Marx.
Yes, yeah.
Is the big he mentions like the early American founders and stuff. And, but it's not.
It doesn't go really before that.
No.
Yeah, it's more of a defense of I think the founding ideologies.
And I don't think there was any. I don't know if it was really a defense either. I think it was more of an explanation of the correct way to interpret the founding.
Yeah, but okay, yes, but wouldn't you say that he's in some way saying that this correct way is the way the founders intended it to be?
I didn't glean that.
Okay. Yeah.
Or I didn't glean. It was really quite. Just like a black and white. This was the founding, and I don't. He didn't really even spend that much time on the American founding. Like he didn't. Yes.
Yeah.
It's not like a.
Yeah. I think like he said in his introduction, it's more of a criticism of the right.
Yeah.
Than it is anything else. But
which I think is good. But that's something I actually like about him a lot. Is he's willing to.
Right.
He doesn't go as far as we go, but he definitely calls the right out on their their inability to understand what's going on. But,
yes, their inability to understand, and I think a lot. I mean, the cowardice of the right and everything to not really. And I think also just the ignorance that in the end they kind of still play the same game in which the left is playing.
Well, to play the game they're playing is to cede ground to the left because you're operating their framework. Yeah. Which I've said with like when you talk about capitalism, like you're playing the communist game because they invented the term. It was not the first bit was what I expected, but once you get halfway through, it wasn't. When you were saying it wasn't what you expected, I started to kind of know what you meant. Maybe let me. What all does he discuss in this?
A lot of it, I mean, I think if you're going to say central thesis, the central thesis really heavily relies on I can't remember forgetting the terminology that he says over and over again. Political correctness, right? And how the derivation of political correctness really goes back into social Marxism, which you could trace back to Marxism in general, and how political correctness essentially is a lie because it's intentionally.
And it intentionally creates a false dichotomy.
Yes, and that they believe that somehow you could constitute reality through language, as opposed to merely describe reality. That reality must.
And that's something just a note, and maybe it's something we can talk about. And I think that by the way that it's written and the nature of its content, it's a very good starting point for a ton of other discussions. It doesn't necessarily. Saying it has a thesis is difficult for me because it doesn't make a whole lot of prescriptive arguments. It just kind of is an observation. I mean, there is a little bit of obviously, this is not good in general. There's a lot. It's kind of a general argument, but I don't think it didn't really make tons of arguments about the nature of language per se,
right? Yes,
or any of that. But
but I don't think you need that for a thesis. A thesis, could be a polemical, and I think in many ways it's more of a polemical thesis than it was, or a prescriptive one.
Or it has a different thesis than I thought it would. I think because of the name Speechless, the emphasis on language and the arguments he would make on the show and stuff, and that I've seen him make and writing and stuff. I was expecting it to be like a argument about linguistics or something. But I was expecting.
I think that was my first reaction. My first reaction was, I think when I texted you, I was like, it isn't that I disagree with him, but I do think that the argument could have been made better.
Well, it could have been made fuller by a lot.
Yes, yeah.
So what it is I don't remember exactly what the order of the chapters is, but it starts with essentially describing the issue of political. Which what I was going to say is I don't super care for the I don't care for the phrase politically correct and like good. No. Getting turnt tonight.
No, I don't feel anything right now.
Crazy. I know the ratios. What was I saying? It's the same thing that I just really think that it's just too loaded and not effective as a compensated phrase. Yeah. It's not. I don't know what the word is. When people make arguments about political correctness, it just feels platitudinous in a way because it's been said so much. And I understand that a lot of the book is really trying to reframe what people think of political correctness because he correctly recognizes that the term has been perverted a lot.
Yes, yeah.
And the way that it's used is not correct. And we do this all the time. So it's like when we talk about the good, we have to talk, it's like we do that.
We have to,
But it's, I don't care for the phrase because it just isn't specific and it's not effective as a rhetorical
and I think I would agree with you there. But I guess that really wasn't what my main reaction was. I think my main reaction was just strictly speaking on truth basis, not so much whether it's effective or convincing, but its truth value. I think some of his arguments, and this isn't just unique to him, I think this is unique to a lot of people on the Daily Wire in general, and a lot of conservatives in general, is that they normally commit the fallacy of it's called the fallacy of appeal to tradition, where you were to claim that this always has been done this way, therefore it should be done this way. And so, like, one of his main topics in the beginning of the book was how censorship was always a facet of language. Yeah. It was always a facet. It doesn't matter whether you look at the Founding Fathers or
saying a word is essentially censorious.
Right,
It's, or what is it? What's the word? It's not exclusive. It's there's a word. Saying a word is not saying another word.
Yes, yeah. And this is the part where I think he could have made a really strong argument, and also even beyond just simply inductive reasoning of strength, but also he could have made a very sound argument, and he didn't really take the opportunity to do it. And so most of his defense in terms of why we should have censorship was a historical context of how censorship always existed. So he talks about how the Founding Fathers had ideas that we shouldn't say things, and he says it on the show many times, right? That we shouldn't. I forgot the terminology, but things that are too grotesque. Profane, yeah. And whatnot. That there was always censorship within speech. And then, so his basic, I think, I know I'm paraphrasing, but he said that censorship will always exist. It will always exist within language, and so it shouldn't be about us getting rid of censorship. It should be us censoring the right things, and that's essentially what he's saying.
I think you said it's an argument you've made a ton of times.
Yes, yeah. And it's one that I agree with, but I don't agree with how he got to that conclusion.
How did he get to it?
He gets to it through historical context. He says that historically, there's always these censorships, therefore censorship will always exist. So which
is inductive.
Well, which is inductive, but it's also just like I said, it's a fallacious argument because you're appealing to the way it's always been. It could just be the case that they're always wrong, right? And in every other case, somebody can make a similar argument. Every society always had rape. So it shouldn't be about outlawing rape. It should be how to rape correctly.
And I would say if you were to talk to him about it,
yeah,
he would agree with you.
Yes, yeah.
But we don't know if it was like his writing or content editors.
And that's why I said that. Those examples, those historical examples are good, and I think they are proper to strengthen an argument. but it should offer support for a grounding that can be derived rationally. And so, like a more rational argument would have been, I mean, there's probably different ways you could have went about it, but one that came to me quite quickly was simply talking about the nature of language. That the nature of language inherently, especially when we talk about propositional statements, and so when you have declarative sentences, there are three basic laws that it has to follow. And so, for example, the LCM, law of excluded middle, as well as the law of non-contradiction, necessitates the omission of the contradiction in order for you to accept a certain proposition. Yeah. And so it isn't so much that just because historically we've always censored people, therefore we should. It is simply that within the nature of language, with the law of non-contradiction, the law of identity, or the law of excluded middle, it always will necessitate by its nature censorship. And that this is an inescapable reality. And I think by making a deductive argument that way, then he could inductively show historically why this always played out this way. And something like that would have just...
Yeah, it is worth observing.
It is. Of course it is, yeah. I have no issue with that, but normally, like when I write theses, or if I have to grade students or whatever, the main thing I always say is, like, think of every possible scenario in which the opposition can attack you on. Because the opposition could simply attack him on and say that, well, just because it was done this way this whole time doesn't mean, by virtue of always being done this way, it should continue to be this way. Because I think he would. I mean, I don't think, but I think he definitely has many times said how, people have just done things wrong for a long time, and that it's probably better just to stop it. I mean, people sin, people do whatever. These things always exist within every civilization, and that should never be I guess, a warrant or permission.
Get more ice.
Yeah. What's that again?
Ice.
No, I'm good right now.
Anyway.
So that was my first reaction. It was just like this part, even though I agree with him 100%, the way he derived that conclusion wasn't spelled out as strong or sound as it could have been. Where I think it leaves open the ability for like a libertarian to attack him on that. Which I think it shouldn't be the case. Like I think he's smart enough, and I do think he's correct enough where that argument could have just been solid.
It's like we both know that he knows that.
Yes, yeah.
So I don't know if it was a marketability thing, or I don't know. Like I'm not trying to attribute manipulation or any whatever.
Me either. Yeah.
The other thing, my first impression is it's not a very Catholic argument at all.
Yes, yeah.
He references the church. I'm looking at the section where he's like talking about like toleration and like tolerance and stuff.
Yeah.
And he's like, the church has historically been the most tolerant organization.
Yeah.
But they've also been the least because they launched the Crusades and then like.
Yeah.
He could have just stopped there and like talked about tolerance for a while.
Yes, yeah.
Like an argument about toleration, but he just kind of just skipped over it. Didn't talk about what
the other one I think I wrote in my notes was about Christmas, and he did the same thing. And I honestly wonder if it was just not to offend potential Protestant readers, because obviously there's many conservatives are Protestants, and so there's probably like 50% of his audience that listen to him are Protestant. And so it could have just been like he doesn't want to offend like a large group of his followers. But like he began with a very strong point about how the Protestants were making shit up about the Catholics and Christmas, right?
Yeah. I was like, okay, this is.
That's how I was like, okay, this is good.
This is in our wheelhouse.
Yeah, and I thought that then he would start tracing back the origins of I guess changing meanings through back to the Protestant revolt, because and this is the part that
he didn't talk about the Protestant revolt once,
and I know he knows it because he says it many times on his show, but he doesn't want to go so far. Like I think recently he was like, I don't want to offend my Protestant brethren or whatever, and I think it almost felt that way, like he held himself back from making a stronger claim, because what even makes Marxism possible is the Protestant revolt, right?
That's what. So here, can we have a conversation about this? Real
Yeah,
quick?
yeah,
And he did it, and everybody does it.
yeah,
I think he did it better than a lot of people do.
yeah,
Because he talked about like Gramsci and stuff. That's
Yes.
a big deal that no one talks about Gramsci,
Yeah.
right? In terms of like cultural hegemony and stuff. But why? This is going to be kind of a tangent, but why the insistence on tracing political correctness just to Marxists?
right, yes.
Like, why is that? That's the root of it. It's like, no.
No, yes, yeah, yeah. Political correctness, the changing of definitions, and
Like, he referenced the Albigensians once.
I know, this is where I thought it was going to be more interesting. Okay, thank you, because it's obvious where this all stems back to, right? Like, if you really want to get rid of Marxism, it isn't enough to just go back to the years before Marx, because there was an ideological structure that led to that. You know, because when you really think about what the Protestants did, think about every word in which they redefined.
Yeah.
They redefined God, right? They redefined church. You know, like the Catholics, it wasn't just like this mystical union of believers. Like, there was a physical building, which is St. Peter's Basilica, where the Pope lives, and there's a hierarchy. Like, when the Catholics talk about church, it's both the spiritual aspect, but also the physical aspect. That it isn't just one or the other. When the Protestants just redefined that, they made up history about Christmas, about Easter. You know, they're like, so many people still till today believe the ridiculous notion that there was like these pagan gods. What was it, mythos or mythias or whatever?
Yeah.
And another god in which the Roman Church encompassed the date of the 25th. But no, the Catholics believed and still believe that historically that things were tied together neatly, and so that's why Anno Domini Christi, the year of AD, the year of our Lord, begins with the death and resurrection of Christ. That is the beginning. And so they trace back from that point to December 25th. Well, first they traced back to his conception, and then they traced it to his birth, and that's how they came to that date. It wasn't, you know, I mean, this is just.
Which he does make the point. He makes that
He
whole
does,
point. Yeah.
yes, yeah, but he doesn't go far enough to say that, you know,
The Protestants did this.
yeah, the Protestants did these redefinitions.
Catholics never thought that.
Yes, yeah, the rewriting of history, like all this traces back to Luther, all this traces back to the Protestant revolt. That they rewrote history, that they changed language, that they wanted to change the meaning of things and the definition of things. And then you really saw this uproaring throughout Western philosophical and theological thinking for a very long time before Marx was ever around.
Yeah.
And you know, the idea that you could read the Bible and interpret it yourself without appealing to some kind of authority or appealing to the truth, but just your own your own personal relationship with God. I mean, all these things. I mean, how else would you have got to the idea that truth was subjective? I mean, they began in the Protestant world, that you could subjectively interpret the Bible, and your personal relationship to the Scripture that goes to Christ allows you to understand the truth. But that's an intimate and personal truth that nobody can take away from you. It's like, yeah, I mean, all these things are Protestant, and it isn't sufficient to just talk about Marxism and Frankfurt School to really get into
Because those are significant.
yes. But those were a
But
development.
they're a step in the chronology.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think he should have bashed the Protestants some more. He just didn't, right? And I do think a lot of it just has to do with
Well, I think
him not wanting to be
if
offensive.
it's just a historical investigation.
Yeah.
Look, I think he's capable of making much more complex metaphysical arguments than he made in that,
Yeah.
or in Speechless. And because he does on the show
Yes.
all
yeah.
the time.
Yeah.
And you know, he says it so smoothly and so
Right.
he
yeah.
knows it.
Yeah.
But if it was just going to be a historical investigation,
He should have went back to the
yeah.
Protestant,
You can't just stop at Marx. It's
Yeah.
like Marx just to happen.
Yeah. Like everything was
But
fine.
and again, I don't think that's a. I don't know if it's a content editor thing. I don't know if that's him.
I don't either,
I don't
yeah.
know, because he knows that.
And he makes quips every once in a while about it, but then he always stops short of just saying it, right? And maybe he thinks of it more of a prudential matter, that he shouldn't be that offensive or that,
which is fine.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
It's a product, so it's not
right.
not
It is,
like,
yes, yeah.
But as far as objective analysis goes, like
Yeah, and probably in terms of marketability, it wouldn't have been good for him, because it would have pissed a lot of people off. But I do think
I think he would enjoy that though if it was just him.
I think so. Yeah,
I think he likes that.
Yeah.
I think he enjoys making people.
I don't think
mad.
he'll be disagreeing anything
Yeah.
that we're saying right now.
No.
And it probably made it in one of the first editions, but the editor was like, you can't talk about that. Because like reading that
The
part,
editor is like, I'm a Protestant.
yeah, like reading the parts where he was talking about the Protestants, like rewriting of history and everything. It's almost like you could sense his frustration with them, and you could sense that he understands that this goes deeper than Marxism. But then it stops, and as if he skipped on to the next chapter. It's like, why? Like, it was just getting interesting.
I know.
Like, I want to have a deeper investigation on this.
So what it is my real like impression halfway through is like, oh, okay, so he does explain the contemporary idea of political correctness well.
Yeah,
He does a very good job of describing that.
yeah,
But then instead of talking about it,
yeah,
he provides a lot of examples of the ways that it's manifested.
yes, yeah,
And that I was like, I already knew those.
yeah,
I already
yeah.
like. I mean, but he did a good job. He did a very good job of explaining like the mechanics of the events and stuff he was describing.
Yes,
and, like there's
yeah.
like the stuff about it I didn't know, and like that's
No,
kind of
yeah,
what
I thought
you
that
said
way,
like
too.
before you even read it. You're like, yeah, there's going to be a lot of like historical stuff you're just not going to know.
I know, yeah.
But like
Which I think
he
was
could
great.
have taken 3 of those examples and written a book of the same length.
Yes.
And argued about the significance of each of those.
Yeah. Which I think would have probably not probably, but it would have definitely made the case stronger.
I don't really know what the case was.
I think the case was that we shouldn't be just accepting the rewriting of language and
Because I think the
of the
first
left.
little part did really well in that.
Yeah.
And then the last part did really well.
Yes.
But then the rest of the book, I wasn't really sure what the thesis, what
Right. Yeah, and I agree with you there. I think that some parts of it should have taken a little more time editing to just say like, well, I don't even know why you're bringing this part up. Like it almost just seems like talking points from a show. But it's fine. I mean,
again, it's a product. And like
yeah,
that's,
and that part doesn't bother me too much. I think what would bother me more was not getting into, like I said, first discussing the nature of language, and then secondly, if you're going to make a historical argument, not taking it back to Albigensianism and Protestantism, which
he did though. I mean, he
almost
slipped it in.
Yes, he did.
And I bet what happened
Yeah.
is he knew about all of it. And he's like, guys, I gotta get a jab in.
Yeah.
And they're just like, no. And he's like, just let me.
I know.
Let me jab the Albigensians. No one knows who that is. Just let me do that. Can I do that? And then he picks heresies and names them.
I know.
And
Yeah.
he's like, no one's gonna know what these are, so I can jab those.
Yeah. But yeah, it's like the picking and choosing. I mean, the fucking Protestants took out 7 books of the Bible. It's like the entire notion of just manifesting reality to fit your ideology was just the biggest move that the Protestants did that I think left the Western world open to everything else that happened.
Well, in censoring the doctors of the church, they censored
Yes.
the Greeks.
Yes, they did. Yeah.
Because I talk to people about this all the time, and it's why I get so bored talking to people. It's like you're literally discussing a question that someone answered like 2,000 years ago.
Right. I know. Yeah.
And I can't.
It's the same thing like reading early modern and even late modern philosophers. It's like you obviously never even read Aristotle.
Just read Aristotle.
Yes, it's like why this shouldn't be an issue if you
I tell people that very seriously. They're like,
Yeah, I know.
they're like, I want to read. I'm like, just read Aristotle.
Yeah.
Just
don't even know Parmenides and Heraclitus debate, and then they're sitting here
hundreds
talking
of
about
years
yes,
of
yeah.
Greek philosophy.
Yeah.
They answered all these questions
Yeah.
much more simply and concisely.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, there was this entire book by Schelling. I think it was the German philosopher of the 21st century? I think around Heidegger's era.
So not the 21st century.
I mean 20th century. I'm sorry. Yeah, 20th century, and it was.
It was like that's
I know.
now.
Yeah. And he was just talking about how he believes the grounding of being is pure potency, and was like, this is the problem with his arguments would have been so easily solved by anybody who read Aristotle, or anybody who even at least have read the discussion between Heraclitus and Parmenides. That would have been
Or
sufficient.
read the commentary.
Commentary on it. Yes, yeah. I mean,
Which one wrote in like one-liners? Is it Herc?
Oh, that was Parmenides.
Really?
Parmenides was more. It was weird.
Because there's not a lot of surviving writing from either.
There isn't, yeah. But there's a lot of
there's
writings
later
out there.
commentary
Yes, yeah.
of the same era.
Yeah, and Plato writes on them and everything. He even wrote a book called Parmenides, in which the young Socrates encounters Parmenides and everything. And so yeah, there's I don't know. It's like all of these issues could have been solved simply by reading even just scholastics. You don't even have to go that far back because at least.
Well, the thing about the
even a
scholastics is they're like the God language charged.
Right. Yes.
They're very
yeah.
theological, and
Yeah.
that turns people off. And I'm like, okay, well then just read Aristotle,
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
because Aquinas is just Aristotle updated and
Yeah.
brought to its theological end.
Yes. Yeah.
But it's not like he's not really disagreeing with Aristotle. Though.
Right. I know. Yeah.
The roots are all there. So
And
just read
even
Aristotle.
if they didn't want to read like a Christian one, they could have read Alfarabi or Avicenna or somebody. You know, if they're turned off by Christianity, just read one of the Mohammedan philosophers. And many of them chose different words in different languages. You're not going to see the word God in there, and so it's like, I don't know. There's just such a wealth of like.
Here's a
1500
question.
years
Speaking of words,
yes, yeah.
I think so. That's the thing. So let me look really quick. Let me see. Okay, first of all, something shocking from it. I didn't know that there were charges that referencing cultural Marxism was anti-Semitic.
I didn't know that one either. Yeah.
And then I looked it up and I was like, it's true.
Yeah.
Wait, so if I go and Google cultural Marxism, because again, I think that's a platitude.
Yeah.
It doesn't. It's a far right anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. Why? Like what? Like I don't understand. I don't understand the. That's something he should have spent time talking about how it's anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, because I don't think much people know that.
Yeah, like it's one of the criticisms now of cultural Marxism is that it's anti-Semitic, like it's Jew hating.
Yeah.
I'm like, what does Marx? It's like, why? What's the what?
Yeah, I really don't know.
What like logical somersaults are you having to do to get there?
Yeah.
Because I don't remember what year it was, but they actually, like, I'm reading Wikipedia. Cultural Marxism is a far-right anti-Semitic conspiracy theory which claims Western Marxism is the base of continuing academic and intellectual efforts to subvert Western culture. And it's like, I mean, true. Like, it is an academic and intellectual effort to subvert Western culture. I don't think it. So here's one of my theories. Or it's not a theory, it's just a fact. You're going to agree with me. Is that the reason that Marxism is such a loud talking point when you're referencing like political correctness, which is itself a loud talking point. It's just a talking point. It's not I don't think talking about political correctness per se is useful. I think you have to explain. You could just talk about what political correctness is and have a more rich conversation without using the catchphrase because it's too loaded. Marxism is too loaded. But I think that in the contemporary conscience, Marxism is a really easy, well-recognized, or at least like partially widely understood framework of ideology. And so talking about it, if you use Marxism, you don't have to explain as much if you were like, oh, well, the Albigensians. And they're like, okay, so you have to like walk them through hours of like history talk and then talk them through like the history of metaphysics and stuff. You can just say Marxism and they're like, oh, that's bad. And I get that communists, like you can kind of talk about communist, like people. If you just walked up to the random person, This okay, a randomly selected semi-intelligent person could tell you what communism is. That couldn't tell you about the Protestant Revolt. So it's like it's an easy milestone to reference, and anything before that in that vein, they're not going to know. So I think that's the reason. Do you need more? Oh my God, you're going to drink all my gin.
I don't feel anything with it. I don't know why. Maybe it takes a while to hit you.
Well, it's spirits. Spirits they'll sit in your stomach, and then once your body starts to digest, you also ate a bunch of food.
Yeah.
So you might suddenly be like, "Whoa!"
Okay.
That's what happens with me and whiskey, and I really enjoy it. But yeah, like this is my favorite cocktail to make at home. It's just Tanqueray and like Schweppes Diet.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't have any of that like weird. It's called diet. It should just be called like sugarless. It should just be called like, what would you call it? Tonic water without sweetener.
Yeah.
Because it's not, when you hear like diet, like Diet
just
Pepsi,
like
there's no aspartame in it.
Sparkling
There's no
water with quinine.
Yeah, there's no sucralose in it.
Yeah.
But it's extremely drinkable. But it has all the bitterness and the herbal kind of quality that you'd want from a gin and tonic. Anyway, because that's kind of what I was thinking about, is I get hung up. So I'm trying. Maybe we can like kind of describe the way, because the things I get irritated about are adjacent to the things you get irritated about generally, but they're not the same thing.
Yeah.
I get irritated when I'm like when I hear someone say, "Oh, cultural Marxism," I get irritated. 'Cause I'm like, "Oh, it's a platitude." Like that's not eloquent at all. That doesn't mean anything. It's not. No one's gonna know what you're talking about. You're going to get more irritated by like the technical. You're going to not get as irritated about referencing cultural Marxism as much as like the argument being bad.
Yeah.
Once I hear a word like that, I'm just like, ugh.
Yeah.
Like just don't. You don't have to say cultural Marxism because you can just talk about what it is.
Yes. Yeah.
And again, I'm not. It's not a criticism of Knowles or anything. It's just that's generally true.
Yeah, and I think I get more. I don't even know if irritated is the right word, but I get more impassioned when I'm in agreement, because it's like I feel like yelling at the book, and I'm like, I agree with you.
Like what?
Like,
like when you're in agreement, but it's not said the way you would say it, or
the argument wasn't made properly. It's
or
like
the argument you could make right now would be better than that.
Yes, It's like you could have just made this so strong that any opposing argument would have just fallen flat. And
which I think could happen if he encountered someone that had the argument with him.
Yes, of course. I think, like if you went through discussion or whatever, like if he's discussing with somebody.
It really has to be a marketing thing. Just listening to him talk on a show, and he'll be he'll be talking to somebody on this like mailbag thing. And he's like, you should just convert. Like, he'll like make like a. Just be Catholic. He'll make little comments insinuating that or saying it outright, and I'm like, okay, like he thinks Protestants are funny, like.
And this is the one part that I think he probably would disagree with me in, is that I don't understand why Catholics, just because the left is crazy, I don't think gives a justification to align yourself with Protestants. And I think there's been too many like Catholics who are, because
I think Walsh is like Protestant aligned.
Yeah. But it's almost as if they feel like as long as they somewhat agree that there's Jesus, that there's God,
like what my mom was saying.
Yeah,
like just stuff like that.
That we shouldn't really be fighting, but we should be fighting together because the left is so insane.
I will say really quick, any listeners that haven't listened to the episode with my mom, that was one of the best ones we've ever recorded.
Yeah.
Continue. It's just a very good like Protestant versus Catholic thing.
And that's the part that I get a bit frustrated in, because I just feel like we shouldn't. I mean, because to concede with the Protestant ideas at all really is, in the end, to concede with the origins of what we're trying to fight against. There was one part in the book where he says that we have to again. I think I actually might have Yeah, he says, we must then articulate a plausible vision of both the common and highest good. Mm-hmm. And then this is the part I'm like, well, no. Because, highest
the common good has nothing to do rationally.
Right, but even the notion of highest good, that's a Kantian notion, which he called the summum bonum, the highest good. Mm-hmm. And this was in contrary to the Thomistic worldview, where you're not really looking for the highest good, the summum bonum. You're looking for goodness itself. Mm-hmm. And so...
Well, so what is it? To say that the highest good is to say the highest thing that is good.
Exactly, yeah. Or the qualities in which one must, encompass themselves to be good.
But not goodness itself.
Yes, because then that again goes back to the anthropomorphic God. It goes back to the ideas that then there are these principles in which God must follow in order to be good, and that these principles is the highest good, and blah blah blah. And then that goes back to like divine command theory of morals. It goes back to even deontological morals of Kant. And
Kant's a shithead, but
yes, and so it inevitably will lead back to exactly what he's trying to fight against. We shouldn't be talking about what is the highest good. We should be talking about the grounding of being, because there is no distinction between being and goodness, and there is no distinction between being and beauty, and so on and so forth. Like that is what we need to go back to, not the mess that the Protestant revolt left things for. That then you could be speaking of the highest good without God. Essentially, that is what the...
Didn't you say that Knowles has been making comments about how he prefers feudalism?
Yes, yeah. At least the era of the feudal period. I don't think he used the word feudalism, but he talks about...
He means feudalism.
Yeah.
Because really, it's impossible for you and I to both individually align with him ideologically, 99.9% of the time, and him not agree with us on that.
Yeah.
Let me see what else. Another thing. This is kind of in the same, referring to culture Marxism is, I don't want to say it's an out, because it's not an out. Because there's an argument to be made about Marxism in the way that it's been kind of disseminated into the larger culture, especially in the U.S. and stuff. But the appeal to 1984 and A Brave New World constantly, I think that those are...
I think I have something here, though, too, yeah.
So let me try to formulate this before you go off.
No, I won't go off. I just want to follow what you're saying, yeah.
You do go off, but, I want to get a thought out before you...
Yeah.
Because you're good at talking. It seems to me... Well, I mean, it is the case that, if you were trying to make an ontological argument for something, and you go, well, this poet said, and then you read a poem, and you're like, okay, that maybe described the reality of the thing in a poetic way, but that wasn't an argument. Saying that Aldous Huxley wrote a novel that really reflects the time we're living in right now, and it's just okay, he was right about something, or described the way that utopia manifests well. What else do you have to say about that? What there's never any. It's just 1984. And it almost becomes a religious text in a way that it's if you read 1984 and the way that they butcher language and the way that the way in which they manipulate language affects the people and the way that they think and stuff. It's that's descriptively true. In a lot of ways.
Yeah.
It's poetic, it's metaphorical, but it's not an argument. Yeah. It's just a piece of fiction that it mirrors what's happening now. Yeah. Because it was intuitive. I'm not saying that the guy it's not an unintelligent person. It would take an intelligent person to be that spot on, but that's not an argument for anything. 1984. It's that doesn't say anything.
I don't know why they always reference it. Nor is it even. Maybe I can't criticize it because I've never read it. I know the story. I also never read Huxley's. What was it, Brave New World? I know about it. I read about the books, but I've never read the book themselves. But I don't think any of those are as profound or significant as, let's say, the Brothers Karamazov.
Oh yeah.
Right, and I think that's the part.
That's why Peterson is so good, because he goes to those.
Right. Yeah.
He doesn't go to Orwell and stuff.
Yeah. And so I have no problem people going to novels, but it's if you're going to choose novels, choose ones that are a little more profound. You know.
Well, it's literally, physically, it's this versus this.
Yes, yeah. Yeah.
And for listeners, I just mimed 1/2 an inch and like 4 inches. One of them is going to be more complex.
Yes, yeah.
And that's kind of, I really wish that this was like a huge fat thing.
Oh, yeah, or like a 5-volume book.
Yeah, because he has it in him.
Yeah.
He's wordy enough. He has the intellect for it, really.
And maybe he was worried about boring the audience. 'Cause I think
it's a product. I don't know
Exactly.
how much of this was the result of a Daily Wire marketing thing, or like, oh, we're going to have you write a book or something. I don't know if it was him independently with the publisher. I don't know how it came.
Yet.
I think how it came about would tell me a lot about it.
Yes.
Because
But it does have to be marketable.
it does.
So something that would have been as dry as because I think in the end he was like, I hope this wasn't as dry or something like that as
Well, he said, I know that this is. What
Yeah, yeah,
exactly did he say? I remember the line.
Yeah.
He said, like, can I find it?
Yeah, you can find it. Yeah.
Let me see if I can find it. It's like the last couple pages. Let me see. Man, the freaking note section. It's still the note section. Like, look at that. Like a third of the actual physical book is the note section.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm going to find it, but but yeah, he makes a comment about how like he's like, yeah, I know that this was just because it's historical.
Yeah, it might have been
recounting
too
of
much
events.
citations and too dry or whatever.
Oh no, that wasn't it. I saw the word complain. I was like, oh, it must be that. Yeah, it was in the Methuselah part. I do think that I think it's very readable.
Oh yeah.
I think he has a very good command of. I think he's a good writer.
Oh, I do too. Yeah.
There's many lines in it. I have some quoted that I really enjoyed. But that's the problem. If we're going to start doing like deep dives into like contemporary books that people are reading and stuff, we're all just going to be like, oh, this wasn't enough. Oh, this wasn't. We're always
Right, yeah.
But like the arguments, we could just extrapolate.
Because I think
I
what
don't
we're
remember
doing
exactly.
right now,
I can't find the line.
because
but,
the way I view what we're doing right now is more of a defense of his work, so that
oh yeah, because he's a smart guy,
right, yeah,
and we like him a lot.
and that if anybody reads this and they think that they could object to us, like you really can't. These arguments simply weren't spelled out.
Yeah.
Right, that there's more that could have been spelled out. I think that would have made the case stronger, and I don't think it would have made it boring. Like,
well, the way that he writes, I don't think it would have been boring.
yeah,
And they get like someone else wrote it.
yeah.
But he's not dry.
Right, he's not, yeah. And so when he, if that was a worry of his, I would just, hopefully, somebody would tell him, don't worry about that, because you should be making this even more sound. You should be making the kind of arguments that really makes it so solid that there is nothing that somebody could simply object. Oh, yeah, sure.
You just have the rest of it. Or you got a little bit there.
Yeah.
I'll do that like that. I have gotten really way too good at eyeballing ratios, drinking at home alone.
Yeah. So
But
to go back where you were talking about the Brave New World and Orwell's, like the one part that that I thought was an interesting point that he made, but but one of the few times that I would say I kind of disagreed with him was really this part. And so he says that in Orwell's view, that it was like Puritanism that kind of took a hold, and in Huxley's worldview, it was like the permissive sexual behavior.
so
and everything.
we got to explain that really quick. In 1984, the way that the state apparatus, the ideological manipulation, took place on the level of, or not on the level of, by way of very, very strict puritanical moral codes.
Yeah.
And then in Huxley's Brave New World, they numbed the populace by way of just exacerbating vice to where where they no longer had control over their rational capacities because they were so degenerate in their temperance. They had no temperance at all.
Yes, yeah.
Which I think Michael Knowles connects with a lot. I think he really likes that kind of argument because it is true that would be the case.
Yeah.
That people do that. That vice does that to people.
Yes, I do agree with that. But it seems like he was more in line with that Huxleyan worldview.
Like that's what's happening now.
Yeah.
It's not
and
puritanical.
Yes. And I think that they're both right. Oh, yeah. You know, like I don't think Huxley was more right. I really do think it was the case. Wait, thank you. Yeah, I think it was the case that that obviously more sexual activities have become permissive than it was in the past. But
the policing of language is puritanical.
Not even that, but even for example, the sexual activities, it isn't so much so that we have simply permitted more sexual behaviors. I really think that the desideratum simply changed. And so like what I wrote here
Tell
was,
the audience what a desideratum is, please.
Oh, I think that's desire, that the principles of what makes something the thing, right? Yeah. And so when you really think about it, it says that what I wrote here was that there are so many sexual acts that right now we have that is deemed improper by the left, such as sex with someone who is drunk or some kind of substance abuse, right? Especially a woman. An older gentleman and a 14-year-old girl, or an older gentleman with a 14-year-old boy, sex with an animal, manipulating women for sex, sex with a baby, sex with a 6-year-old bride like Muhammad, rape, father and daughter having sex even if it's with an age, but there's something icky about like the father fucking an 18-year-old daughter. And that's what it was really just kind of to name a few. And so it isn't so much that we have become less puritanical and more permissive. It's simply that prior, with a Puritan worldview, it was that any sexual activity outside of marriage is evil. And with a secular worldview now is that any sex outside of consent is evil.
I was waiting for you to say it, yeah.
And so
it's like a kid in class, you're like, I want to just say it first before you do.
And so this is where I think that both of them are correct. It is true that we have swapped vices and say that this is vice, and because for example, in the Puritan worldview, you couldn't rape your wife. Like that was an impossibility because your wife is
marriage is a consent to sex.
It's marriage.
So it's not the sex that's sinful,
right? Yes,
it's the assault or whatever.
Yes, yeah.
I don't remember which one we talked about that.
We did
long time ago.
While in today's worldview, it's a difference. Like you could rape your wife because they don't really hold marriage
once
as really being
consent
sacred.
is revoked, then
yes, yeah. If the person says no at the time or I don't feel like it, and then you still do it, then that becomes rape. And so I think we're just as puritanical as we ever were. It's just that we changed the desideratum. Before it was marriage, now it is consent. And so I think we could make the same argument that he's making in terms of censorship. It isn't so much that we have become more censorious or we have become...
We're censoring different things.
Yeah, we're just censoring different things, yeah.
No.
And so I think both Huxley and Orwell were correct. It was like, yes, it's the Puritanism that becomes oppressive.
But do you see what I mean by that? They're not arguments.
Right, they're not arguments, right, yeah.
Using those as basis for arguments is not
I
an
agree,
argument at all,
yes, yeah.
That's why I got annoyed, because referencing cult, like, that's the thing, is I think when you appeal to Marxism, you're like, oh, well, Marxists started this. It's so vilified that what's the word?
Sorry,
That
I'm having trouble hearing.
Siri.
That was weird.
No, it's sometimes there's certain phrases you can say and Siri will come on. I don't remember what it was. I would.
Rape.
She's like, I'm reporting you to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. They'll be there in 3 minutes. Anyway, the FBI headquarters is what?
Oh yeah.
Is
3
if
blocks,
you're at speed, 15 seconds away.
Yeah.
At speed limit on the street. Anyway, yeah. So we were right next to the feds. We were right under the nose of our opponents, of our adversaries. the villains in our podcasting narrative. But it's almost as if, because everyone hates Marxists so much, that appealing to Marxism itself is a slam dunk. That doesn't actually convince people of anything who aren't already ideologically possessed by people who by the hatred for Marxists. So when you spend a lot, I mean, you can say, hey, Orwell and Huxley were right. Here's the way in which they were right. Isn't that interesting? That can be a conversation. But when that is the basis for your argument, that's not going to convince people who aren't already upset about it.
Yeah.
And I think that's so here, when I'm just looking through I took a halfway through, I kind of stopped taking notes because there wasn't really anything to take notes about it. It was just kind of a chronology, or like an example of like, here's the way that it's that political correctness has infiltrated the university system. Here's the way the legal system. Here's the way, and it's just kind of examples of kind of a half thesis. I kind of stopped, but what the interesting part that I think would have made a more effective and interesting book, when he's talking about, like, I really liked the line, where is it, what is it, I don't remember exactly what he said. I don't think I wrote it down. Polite euphemisms soften the truth, but they don't lie. And he's talking about the nature of euphemisms and stuff.
I thought that was really interesting.
That was really, it was good and well written. And when he was talking about how, like, what is it? Cripple gave way to disabled, gave way to handy-capable. And once you reach the level of handy-capable, now you're lying because they're not capable.
Right, yeah.
And how euphemism, it's no longer euphemism, it's their lies. There's a lot of like same-sex marriage, it's an oxymoron.
Right.
And how all of these phrases are oxymoronic, and like this it was a really, I mean, it was better than surface level, but it wasn't an extreme, like, it needed to be elaborated. But I mean, it was a discussion of linguistics.
Yes.
It was maybe not even just linguistics, but like the way that linguistics, or the way that the words we say operate on a linguistic level. Yeah. That was more, I wish he would just have written about that.
No, me too, yeah. I
because once he, like a third of the way in, he's just giving examples. And I'm like, okay, because it's that, and then right after that he talks about the Gramsci, the early communist stuff. I'm like, okay, just stick there. And just talk about the relation between the early communists and like linguistics or something. Like, just make it would have been a very, because it's hard for me to accept that the book had a strong thesis at all, because it didn't really do that. It didn't extrapolate much of an argument.
Yeah, and I guess I would agree with it. I don't think it was strong. In the end, it was a weak statement. Which is a statement, and maybe I'm just one who doesn't like weak claims, and by weak I don't.
Well, you're bored by them.
Yeah,
and
I don't mean it as an insult. Like, by weak, I just mean, like, academically, when you make a weak claim, it's simply saying that you do not want to hold a position as absolute.
Which he does, obviously, knowing how he talks.
Yeah,
but if someone picks this up off the shelf.
But when you read his book, he doesn't want to go to the point. He's like, I'm going to make this strong claim. More so, I'm going to show it via negativa that all these things are false, and that's all he really wants to show. But he doesn't want to show anything of the affirmative.
Well, it's all he let himself show.
Right,
again, listening to him, you know.
Or I know.
Like, if we had him on, we
we
were all drinking.
Yes.
But
yeah, I think it would be great if he were to make those stronger claims. Like normally, if I'm grading my students' papers, that's what I normally tell them. I'm like, yes, so far what you're writing right now, fine, but make a claim. Like, what is it that you're standing for? Because if you're not going to make that claim, it's like all you're really doing is showing what is nonsensical without showing what is sensical. And that's the part that is missing. It's like you could all day long appeal to the intuition of its nonsense.
Like, spend the last third
building
an argument.
Yeah.
That's why I said you could take a third of the argument of the historical
Yes.
chronology,
Which is great. I mean, he did so much research.
it's
for that.
incredible.
Yes, the kind of research of
Again,
we
what?
need that.
So, have you seen the book physically?
No, I just have the ebook.
Look at this. This is the notes section.
Yes.
It's what is that it's over a fourth. It's
Yeah.
like a third of the entire weight.
Yes, yeah.
Thickness of the book is notes,
Yeah.
and literally the notes are a sixth of the thickness of the book. That's
yeah.
crazy.
I know.
For a book like this.
Yes. That kind of research is good, and it's noble, and it's something that can be used for making more, I guess, proper arguments. But yeah, I guess that's the only part that for me was like I wish it was present. It was like, just say it, say the Protestants were wrong, say that they kind of ruined all of these ideas with their making up of history.
Or if you don't want to just talk about linguistics, just
or just make sound arguments deductively of the nature of language, and why it necessitates censorship, why it necessitates.
That's
other
the thing is when you use historical examples, it hits home harder.
Yeah.
If you have made a deductive argument that is now an example.
Yes.
Or of which that is a historical example.
Yeah.
We talk about the war on Christmas or whatever. Like,
Yes. Yeah.
if you make an argument, a really strong deductive argument, and then use that as an analogy for it, that's good.
Yeah. And he could talk more. I think it might have been his episode. I don't remember. Now I'm getting things confused, but I think it was in a book where he talked also about schooling, right? Because I think that there's many people that don't realize that public schools originally was made to counter Catholic schools.
Oh yeah.
Because the Catholics are the ones that built all the universities, that built all the schools there. So making a public school was a retaliation against the Catholics.
You can go here for free.
Yes, yeah. And so it's like the very nature of a public school really is to be anti-Christian. It is to be anti-Catholic.
Because that's I want to start going through because
Go ahead, man.
I took a note for the first half again because I really think that first third was the strongest.
Yeah.
If you just read the first third, the 4 chapters, it's when he starts through psychoanalysis. I think it's really strong. Like this whole thing on Reich and the orgone accumulator and the whole the way that psychoanalysis got insane and detached from reality is really strong. And then after that, it's like there was this riot at a university. He just starts talking about things that everybody talks about. Those things, no one talks about Reich.
Yeah.
No one talks about Gramsci. It's worth reading just for that.
Yeah,
Most people don't know Gramsci. Communists I know don't know who that is.
Yeah.
Like he's as far as like if you actually want to make an argument about how American political correctness derives from Marxist social or the social understanding of or the social feature of Marxism, Gramsci's like extremely important. People don't know about that, and I think that he knows that. But in avoiding making any more further claims about that, he just kind of talks about things that everybody knows. Like everybody knows about Ben Shapiro getting shot at. Everybody knows about Michael Knowles getting shot with the piss gun or whatever it was. Like people know about that. Like there's no point to be made there unless you're going to walk it back to what you were talking about earlier, and then there's no walking back any farther than I mean, he said the Albigensians. I was like, okay, at least he's willing. At least he's willing to give us a nod. But I'm trying to. I don't know from reading it, and again, this is something that needs to be expanded. Is the phrase "the personal is political"? That's a huge thing to unpack. Yeah. Because it's not the fact that everything political is personal, but it's also totally not the fact that the personal doesn't affect the political at all. Yes. Because that's obviously true. Like how it's the saying that the personal is not political is to say that you have no personal responsibility for anyone else around you at all, which isn't true. That's stupid.
yeah.
That's an anarchist kind of bullshit.
Yeah.
You're not what.
Which we don't have to get into.
We can get it. We can rail on the anarchists later, but I mean that's what it is to say. It's to say that your personal life ought not and does not have any bearing on the political is dumb. But to say that everything you do in your personal life should be politicized is also wrong.
Yeah, I agree.
Which is to just say be made public. Which I think he does a good job also is to kind of trace. Well, he does it on his show. I don't think he did. I don't really don't think that he expanded on the etymology of political any more than he did on his show. But I think he does make COVID, public health. Well, that means political. So don't say that public health is stop making it political because it is political. You know?
Yes, yeah.
He does that a lot. I don't think he did any more in the book. I think that he gave more examples, but I don't think he furthered the argument.
Yeah.
Anymore, but
yeah, I don't know. Like, I think
what do you think of that? The personal's political. Like, what's the
issue I have with it is
again, it's a catchphrase, so it's
yes.
loaded.
Yeah, exactly. It's very loaded, but I think that if we're going to function. Okay, let me start with this. Normally, when people make statements like why you're making everything so political, I don't think they necessarily mean that why you're making everything public. Normally, what they mean is like why you're putting everything within the paradigm of conservatives and liberals.
Yes, they're saying why are you making it partisan in reference to our specific political system?
Yes, that's what they mean. And normally, when people on the because it isn't just him. I think it's like the entire Daily Wire crew. Then when they say no, but it is political, it's like, okay, fine. If we're going to make that distinction, and then we shouldn't just be talking about things being of the left and of the right within the American system. We should be talking about its nature and being, because then that's what it means. And again,
because when you talk about left and right, that's an easy reference point.
Yes.
That if your goal is to convince people of a thing, needs no more reference than just itself.
Yes,
because
exactly.
people have such visceral reactions. So
Yeah.
when you make an argument appealing to the fact that Marxists did something, people hate Marxists so much that's all you need to convince somebody of something.
Yeah.
Which is extremely pragmatic and American.
I know it is, yeah. And so then when he just talks about then conservatives and liberals, I begin to have an issue with it because I don't think American conservatism is Catholic.
At all.
And
well, it's not.
Yes.
I mean, it's like it's not a you think thing. It's like
right,
it's patently
right.
not.
Even though I think there's been so many predominant conservative politicians who were Catholic, fine. I think it in many ways it lines up.
You're talking about what's his name, Buckley, William
Yes,
Buckley, because
yeah.
that's Knowles' guy.
Right? Yes, yeah.
The you queer thing.
Yeah, and I think when you look at it historically,
Yeah.
like many times when you look at the Conservative Party, many of the predominant figures were Catholic, and but I don't know the numbers, but I think you probably could say the same thing about many people on the left. I think many predominant figures on the left were also Catholic.
Well, yeah, because it's
and so
because in I don't know what phrase I want to use to make it sound pretty. In the context of American thought, especially politically, and I say politically because there is nothing that isn't political at this point.
right, yeah.
Especially in regards to traditionally political things. There is nothing that is not squished onto one side or the other of the liberal conservative dichotomy, which are themselves meaningsless terms.
Yes, yeah.
That are essentially just placeholders for things we all like readily recognize, but they saying conservative doesn't describe any ideology that actually exists.
Yes, yeah.
And we've talked about it before. The Catholic Church does not make itself readily categorizable as far as the way in which it can exist in any political system or not. You can be Catholic and be a leftist or rightist or whatever. That's kind of the point.
Yes, yeah.
So,
And this is the part that I think someone like him would disagree. Because then he would say that you can't be Catholic and be a leftist because leftists support abortion.
well, the way that we say leftists do, but you don't have to.
Exactly. That's the thing. Is that...
This is, I mean, the dichotomy between right and left, the spectrum is like totally useless. It doesn't mean anything.
And so my issue is that if we want to make this strong claim that all these things are political anyways because they deal with other people, fine. I have no issue with that. But if we're going to do that, and then we have to eliminate the categories of left and right, conservative and liberal.
Yeah.
And then let's just talk about the ideas.
I think a lot of people would be okay with that.
Yeah.
Because they don't mean anything.
They don't, right, yeah.
You know, like what?
Because like
libertarians.
Yes, I
and-
know.
So libertarians and like Sharia law fundamentalist Muslims
Yeah.
are conservative.
I know,
That
yes.
doesn't mean anything.
It doesn't.
It means,
Like-
I mean, it means not a leftist.
You could
Like,
literally have a Southern Baptist who believes that the Pope has horns underneath his hat.
yeah,
Like literally.
yeah.
And
You're somehow on the same
yes,
political.
if you say that, then you're on the
allied
same
with
side.
the Catholics.
It's like, no, I mean, there's actual meaning behind a Baptist.
What do you think of a parliamentary system where there's like tons of parties?
I like that.
You like it better?
Yeah.
Where they just scream at each other.
Yes.
Do you ever watch the House of Lords? Or
Oh,
whatever?
yeah. I think it's very entertaining and more interesting.
Parliament and stuff.
Yeah, because the
Like whack their shins. and
breaking
stuff.
it into these categories, I think is just ridiculous.
Yeah.
And again, this goes back to what I was saying earlier. To align yourself with the Protestants, I think, is stupid. It's like, okay, well, we really shouldn't because that's not what you believe. Like Catholics mean something. Being a Baptist,
Catholics mean just about more than any other group.
Yes.
As far
being
as
an Eastern
historical
Orthodox means something.
yeah.
Being a Mohammedan means something. Being a Protestant evangelical means something. And there are certain principles that you abide by given those ideas. I wouldn't call them ideological because they're not all related to government. But they're at least related to how we treat each other, so they are political in that sense.
Or your relation to God.
Yeah,
or
your relation to God.
Your body's relation
Yes.
to your soul.
I mean, for a Protestant to hold theistic personalism as...
Which is a thing I think that Knowles would agree with.
Yes. Yeah.
Because he makes points that to say something about a thing is to exclude the possibility of that thing partaking of its opposite or whatever. Like when you say that you are a Muslim or a Mohammedan, you are therefore saying you are not a Protestant.
Yes, yeah, you're negating...
And because those refer to things in reality.
Yes.
Those are ideological systems that exist.
Yeah.
And my
exactly.
problem is when you say that you're
conservative,
that doesn't...
Yes.
You're conserving something.
Yes.
But everyone's conserving something.
Yes, exactly, yeah.
Like are leftists not
like
conservative?
You said,
like what do you? What do
you
you?
could have a Mohammedan that's ultra-conservative, and then you could have a Baptist that's ultra-conservative.
Those mean totally different things.
They
They're
mean
not...
different things, exactly. Then you could have a Catholic
So is there another
conservative.
example that we can think of where you just take a very general adjective, because those are adjectives. Liberal and conservative. Those,
Right, yeah.
And liberal doesn't mean liberal anymore. There's progressives and liberal.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
the other problem I have is the way that it's not a Knowles problem.
It isn't,
He
yes.
says it.
Yeah, that's
but
why I said that.
everybody says it because I don't
It's like,
think English is equipped very well,
Yeah.
especially in the last 150 years.
Yeah.
They say progressive and liberal. You're using adjectives that have actual meaning that are kind of vague
Yes.
and referring to different groups of people as if those would represent ideologies.
Yeah.
That's why I think people who are like, oh, I'm a Nietzschean. I'm like, okay, I think you're a dummy, but like,
At least I mean
at
something.
least I can
Yes,
like read
yeah.
the body of the work of the guy
Yes.
you're talking about. When I say like,
You're a Mohammedan. Yes,
yeah,
you could
okay,
read.
yes. Or like, I'm an Aristotelian. I'm a
Exactly.
Thomist. I'm an Augustinian.
That means something.
I'm a Foucault guy.
But say I'm a conservative. I'm like
It doesn't mean anything.
Yes, what
and
do
this
you
is
mean?
something interesting because again, we have to talk about linguistics. because the book is called Speechless.
Yes, yeah.
And control the words, control the
minds.
ding ding. That worked. I'm glad he didn't turn it into a thing. They didn't have a competition to make the best ding or something.
Oh, I know.
But anyway, that's a personal conversation. What was I saying?
The meaning of the terms conservative and
Yeah, so, man, I've totally lost it.
just got into the ding ding.
Michael, your marketing worked. All I can think about is buying your book from Premier Collectibles, signed. But no, I was talking about reference and stuff. I lost the point. I'm really upset. You're feeling it a little bit.
Now I am finally. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
How your eyes do this thing where you go like this?
Oh, does it? Yeah.
Yeah, when you start to get it's good.
It's like my dad.
We can. Let's not start bullshitting yet. We have more to talk about. But like, hey, Michael, listen to us be ourselves now. Eating a 4-year-old girl and all that. Anyway, damn. I had a really, really good point lined up.
You said to go back to language because it's called Speechless.
No, I know. We're making linguistic arguments.
Yeah.
That can I pause it really quick and go back and listen, and then start recording again?
Oh, no, I could just talk while you're listening, right? Or you have to.
I have to stop it.
Oh,
Now we have to because I said it.
okay,
Can you
fine.
stop recording? So I don't remember the point I was going to make. I have to come up with some kind of a little interlude music or something.
Yeah.
But anyway, let me go down my list. I really had I think it was a point. You know, sometimes you make an argument where you're like, okay, I'm going to make that argument over there, but first I have to set all these up.
Yeah.
I forget what I was setting up. I listened to like 2 minutes of it. I don't know. I love the fact that I can be this eloquent and well-spoken while intoxicated. I can't do it on wine. I can't do it on beer.
Oh, really?
You know, I can't. Anyway.
They give me different types of
Oh! I really liked this point. It's just, okay, I really have the most to say about the first third. So what, there's 15 chapters? I think it's after chapter... I can actually look at it. Let me look at the glossary, or the... What's the thing called? The contents thing. Is that what it's called? No, there's a word for it. Contents? Okay.
Or table of
contents. I think that in 6. Yeah, so he starts the personal, political, the school thing, campuses, new Cold War, taboos, war on Christmas. It's a lot of examples of what he's talking about, but I think right in the top, he goes from kind of outlining the issue to talking about the way that reality is defined, the root of right now, why that's happening in the Gramsci stuff and cultural hegemony and like Reich and stuff. He goes into standards. It's the chapter 4 is standards and practice. He's talking about censorship and stuff, and then he goes into Mao, and I'm like, okay, go to Marx and back. Like I'm like that would have been the launch, or like the tolerant left. Or something. The tolerant left chapter, he's talking about how like the left calls himself tolerant, but they're tolerant of different things in a different way or whatever. Yeah. Like I think that was that first. There's 15 chapters. That first third is a big.
Yeah.
I think that was good.
Yeah.
Especially because we have to remember this was not written for us at all.
Yeah.
This isn't written for people that have spent we have 120 hours online or something of us talking about exactly the thing he's talking about.
Right. Yeah.
And he doesn't have a doctorate in it.
Yeah.
He's not talking to a person who has a doctorate in it. You know, the whole thing. So we can't expect it to be
right. Yes.
a master's thesis or something. You know, it's not. He's not at Leuven or it's a product. But that first part was especially when I think about. When I was reading it, I was like, okay, I'm waiting for more. But then I would think, okay, now this is being marketed to like the layman. This is really good for like this is something that people need to hear. And then after that, I was like, okay, they've heard this. and then you get to the end and you're like, they heard that. Like,
Yeah.
when did you?
This is one of the reasons why I really like Phaser. And so he's able to do both. He's able to
Was Knowles the one who introduced Shapiro to Phaser?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
That's a funny callback.
yeah. And there's something about Phaser's writing where it's so readable, and he has complex ideas and argumentations, but he doesn't make it with such jargon where that anybody could read it. What are you going to say?
No, I'm just reading my notes. I'm like, there's such good, coherent points that he could have really.
I know, yes, I know.
Like when he's talking about how he made the point that we treat government as the end of politics, as if government is intrinsic to politics when it's not.
Yes, yeah.
And I was like, God, that's so good. Like,
Yeah.
like it's only like a few sentences that he even does it.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't remember exactly what the context was in the book, and I don't want to skim through it, but he essentially makes the point that we treat politics as if they per se require government, which I think is something that anarchists would like, that he's making the point that they don't. It doesn't necessarily have anything to do with government per se. It's just the way people interact with each other. That can mean government.
They can, right? Yeah.
But we treat it as if politics require a federal government or something. And I just remember being like, I'd like edging, and then I get to it, and I'm just like it didn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can see how the things he's thinking in his head while he's writing or something. Like there's really some points that could be made.
Yeah, I know. That's what I mean. That's the part that I was getting a bit frustrated in.
Which is in the first third.
It is, yeah.
Because I was waiting. I was like, okay, you know what? I think you said it. You were like, okay, maybe he's going to answer it in the second half or something.
Yeah, because I think it was in chapter 7 when I wrote you.
Yeah.
I was like, after that, I was like, I'm hoping that he answers some of these things, because it's like he could have introduced it early and then later on made a stronger claim that I think he should.
You know what I love is he made the argument about fascism that I always make. Is that when you say what his line was, the way that he described fascism, word for word, is a phantom villain that died with Mussolini on the streets of Milan. And I was like, fist pumped in the air.
Yeah.
I was like, yes, nothing like fascism was devised by Mussolini.
Yes.
In reference to Gentile, which would have been, he was what, in the 1820s? He was a philosopher.
Yeah, yeah.
I think inspired by Machiavelli. I don't remember exactly, but it's essentially once Mussolini died, there was no more fascism.
Right,
Fascism, when you say something is fascist, fascism is a very clearly defined school of ideology and thought that existed at a certain period of time in a certain place.
Yes, yeah.
And calling something fascism at best is poetic.
Yes, yeah.
There is no such thing as fascism after Mussolini died.
Yeah, yeah.
And the fact that he just said that, I was like, that's probably when he mentioned Albigensians, you felt just as
Exactly, yeah.
just as validated.
I was like,
I was like, yes, Michael.
Yes. This message needs to be let out to the average person. That they need.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Like, no, I haven't heard anybody else say that.
Right, yeah.
And then he even makes arguments that are kind of adjacent to my communist argument, that like when you say capitalism, you're playing the communist game.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know if I've extrapolated that on the podcast before or not, but
yeah.
I'm just going through my notes so we can get everything out. But oh, this was interesting. He had a very, I don't know if he necessarily. That's the thing, is he would
Have some ice.
for your water. Oh yeah, it's over here. It's draining on the floor.
Oh, good. That's fine. Yeah.
My bag of grocery store ice. Oh yeah. I've got to start drinking out of my bottle there. My San Pellegrino. Man, this is so decadent and good. Oh, yeah, I really, really hope that it translates to the listeners how much we enjoy ourselves doing this, both corporeally and intellectually.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
beautiful. He had I'm getting irritated all over again in the way that you were getting irritated, in that, like, you know that he knows he needs to make the point, but he doesn't.
Yeah.
When he makes when he makes commentary on how he makes commentary on the way that Mao in China understood the way in which art is the most basic way of engaging ideology.
Yes,
It's
yeah.
and I'm saying it much more eloquently than he said it.
Yeah, yeah.
It was it's something's working when a writer says something and then you have to stop for a second and you reach an idea over there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I was thinking like it's art. I think treated now is because it's a reflection of the self is a final expression of philosophy that like philosophy manifests itself in art.
Yeah, yeah.
And Mao understood that art is actually the starting, it's square one.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
That the aesthetic is the starting place.
It is the
And Knowles
motivator,
was
sure.
making was like there was something there that was synthesizing that point, but he didn't.
Yeah, yeah. I agree. Yeah,
And I just remember like it made me have an epiphany, and that's like cool that I had an epiphany reading it.
yeah,
But he didn't do anything with it.
yeah.
Like if you're going to talk about Mao, make an argument about it, or like do something. It just
Or, if
didn't.
you're going to make an argument about the aesthetics,
Yeah, because that's what Mao was.
Yes,
Mao was recognizing
exactly,
is
yeah.
that art is a tool, and it's like, well, kind of it is. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
it is an expression of something, and you can use that expression to say really what you want, depending on the context, cultural context,
Yeah.
and stuff. Like you can make people think things by the art that you make.
Yes, yeah.
And I don't remember exactly what Knowles had to say about that, but I just remember being like, you just 2 more sentences,
Yeah.
like close it.
Just expand on that.
I'm going down my list. Do you have anything else to say about it, or are we just feeding off mine?
No, you read off yours.
Oh, he made a point. Or, he made a point that either was the point that I'm making or led me to the point, was that leftists, broadly, which doesn't really mean a ton,
Yeah.
American progressives of the current moment, the way that we know them, their disgust with being incorrect is actually correct. Like you should actually respond to people being wrong that way. You should be irritated. You should be angry. It should repulse you a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think that Knowles understands that. And it's like I don't even remember what he was saying. But the fact that I was thinking about these things while he was reading it in that first third,
I know, yeah.
says a lot.
Yeah, because, I mean, I think we've said that so many times in the podcast that this is the aspect in which I believe the left has it correct, is that they firmly are repulsed by, if you go back to speech, they're firmly repulsed by speech that they say ought not to be the case.
Which we have. Intelligent people know what we're talking about.
Exactly.
And you hear someone say something stupid, it should like nauseate you for half a second.
It should,
be like,
yeah.
ooh.
Yeah, yeah.
It should be like staring into the face of the sun for a second.
Yeah.
There's a reaction.
And they do have the reaction because, again, they changed that desideratum. It was either the case that one of them has to be pertaining to truth, and so if you say something that is not true, it should nauseate you, but since they changed theirs to, it should not be offensive to a certain group of people, and then it nauseates them because it does become offensive to a certain group of people. And, but I guess... It goes back to the part that irritates me. It was like that point would have made stronger if you talked about the nature of language. If you talked the nature of propositions, that it is always geared towards truth. It's
and
not
it
geared
really
towards
wouldn't
this.
take that long.
It wouldn't, right? Yeah.
But I think that, I think that that's the reason that our show appeals to people is we do that.
Yes,
And
yeah.
No one else does that.
Yeah.
At least in the way that we do it.
Right, yeah.
In a very accessible, commonly spoken,
Yes, yeah.
vulgar, fun way.
With great examples.
But that also means that our reach isn't massive.
Yeah.
Yet,
That's true. Yeah.
I'm not selling a short.
Yeah.
Where it means that it's not super mass marketable to be totally insane half the time in talking about teenage Tommy Pickles in a diaper, and stuff like that. Like, I don't know how that changes when you have a giant platform.
That's
I don't
true,
know.
yeah.
I don't know what that does. When you have a giant audience that you
Probably makes you think twice before making a joke about
I hope we never do.
I know about Dora the Explorer.
I hope we never do. Our favorite girl on TV. Anyway, you know what point he made a lot, which I don't think that I haven't heard anybody else make, that I don't think is super complex, but I think is worth noting, is that he kept saying that everything has been politicized except politics, which has been personalized.
Right, yeah.
I think he did a lot of that I think was kind of cool and
Interesting, yeah.
interesting and like kind of fresh.
Yeah.
Was that the political is now personal. It's not that the personal is political, it's that it's kind of reversed. It's that, or I guess correctly understood, issues that were political, like healthcare or immigration or whatever, now are not up for debate.
Right, yes.
Because they're you can't politicize those anymore. But everything personal about like what hole you put your penis in or whatever, like that's now a political issue.
Yes, yeah.
And the rights that doesn't or doesn't confer to you or whatever is a political issue, but like no one is allowed to talk about political issues anymore.
Yes, yeah.
And I think that's very obvious on its face, but the way that he worded it was interesting.
Yes.
Or at least concise and quippy. In like kind of a Shakespearean way a little bit. Like, you know, like because kind of when you're an actor, you kind of have to get get a lot of information across in very little poetic lines.
Do you think they're ever going to hire him to be an actor in one of their Daily Wire movies?
I'd love that. I love him.
Especially if they made a comedy. I think he would do really well in it.
I think he'd be very good at comedy.
I know.
I don't know how he feels about that. Maybe he'll direct.
I don't think he could do anything else.
Sorry, Michael.
I mean, he's so like goofy and dorky. It's like I could really see him in a great comedy skit, but was it going to be like a leading man in a romance? I don't think so. He has to work out more if he wants to be like
a
an
leading man,
action
like
star.
by like Jimmy Stewart would be. Jimmy Stewart was
In
kind of dorky,
in
but he was a leading
romantic
man.
comedy. But it still has to be a comedy. Like it cannot be a dry. Like he's not going to be Fabio.
Oh no,
which
but
a woman
I think
desires.
that's kind of a stage actor thing. There's a little bit of a I don't want to say hamminess, but because when you're acting on a stage, you kind of have to what for screen would be considered overact. Because you're on a stage and you have to convey more emotion than you would just on
but I
camera.
mean, just even his appearance. That's what I mean. Like he would have to work out a shit ton if he's going.
Well, he talks about how he never works out.
I know, yeah.
Yeah, so he's probably nodding.
I'm pretty sure. I guess he could be in a drama if he's. I could see him in drama in a certain role, but I think comedy is where it's at.
That's good. That's nice.
Yeah.
I also got really, really enthusiastic when you referenced sodomy. I was like, hell yeah. Contra gentile staple.
It is.
Bitches. It's like, oh, there he goes. He's talking about sodomy laws and stuff.
I know,
sodomy is an act, but sexuality does. Yeah, it's
I know,
the
yeah.
thing. I was like...
Yeah, I mean, there's those instances where, like, I know he knows, but he should have expanded a little more.
Yeah.
You know, just talk about.
So, okay, I'm gonna end.
Yeah.
No. Oh, I really liked his thing on irony. How
yes. Yeah,
irony pervades decadent societies that are collapsing.
Yes.
Because when you speak with irony, you are not responsible for what you say at all because you can claim it's it's sincere or ironic.
Yeah.
Depending on what feedback you receive.
Yes. Yeah. Like I'm more in the mutton chops.
And that's what memes are, is they're ironic.
Right. Oh,
They're very
yeah.
insincere and ironic, and he recognizes that insincerity and humor is a sign of essentially civilizational collapse. If you
Yes, I thought that part was really, really interesting, actually.
Yeah, so the first third, like it's
Yeah. because that was one thing that I didn't really think about. But yeah, but I do think after I read it, I was like that part.
I think he synthesized that really. I haven't heard anybody else synthesize it that well.
I thought that was really good. He could write an entire book just on that.
About irony. And then I think I read the thing, and then I was listening to a show today, and I was like, wow, he just like bullet pointed his book.
Right, yeah.
Because he was saying something about irony. He just made a really offhanded comment about how irony was, you're not responsible for irony. I think that's a very, you are not responsible for, let's try to synthesize a phrase. Contra gentiles, copyright, symbol, trademark, are, you are not responsible for the things you say ironically.
Yeah.
Ever. If you say something ironically, it's not as if you said nothing, but it's that you could have said nothing, and you get to decide because it's ironic.
Yeah.
Which irony properly describes like situations and actions and circumstances. Ironic speech is not healthy.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Now, we've never talked about that before.
We didn't.
So this
Yeah, I
might be
know.
an interesting conversation to have, inspired by Speechless.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Because this is like people who are very sarcastic. One of my pet peeves is when people because he condemns sarcasm in the book, which I think is good because sarcasm is like an invention of the Anglos essentially.
Yeah.
And that you can just be assholes to people but not mean it, which is essentially what sarcasm is.
Yeah.
You're not responsible for being an asshole because you
like
don't
being a
really
bitch,
mean it. Yeah, which that's interesting. As someone called me sarcastic recently, I'm like, I'm not sarcastic. I'm an asshole. There's a difference. I'm just being a dick. I'm not. I'm not being sarcastic. If I criticize you for something, it is not sarcastic. I hope you know that. Like I am actually jabbing. There's no sarcasm. Which I think is the Latino influence of my upbringing, immersion program, but whatever. Let's try to really quickly, if we can. There is a difference between irony in speech and irony in circumstance, because irony in circumstance is how do we define irony? Is it just like a thing, unexpected thing happening that does not follow logical?
Actually, I would have to look it up.
Let me look it up. Let's look up irony definition. Isn't it ironic? Don't you think? Okay. The expressions of one see, no, that's not what I want. A state of affairs or event that seems deliberately contrary to what one expects. So it's essentially a circumstance that is in a direct is either contrary or in direct conflict with what should be expected from a thing. So you go the perfect thing. I've had it before. I want to get fired. So I go and make a huge thing, then they give me a promotion. That's ironic because I'm like, that's not what I expected or wanted at all. I don't know how speech can be ironic because speech is active. You don't just unless you're actually schizophrenic and deeply schizophrenic, you have control over everything you say.
Yeah. Well, I guess it couldn't be circumstantial, but you could say things that is unexpected, I guess.
But that's not ironic. I mean, it's not. That's just. It's not ironic because there's kind of an organic nature to irony that like the thing happened that just wasn't expected. But when you speak, if you were to say something quote unquote ironic, which is this could veer into like hipster territory.
Which they do all the time.
Like, oh, I'm doing it ironically. It's like you're not doing it ironically because you're doing it on purpose. What are you talking about?
Bow tie ironically.
No,
You're
you just wearing a bow tie. And
Yeah.
it's dumb, and you know that it's dumb. It's not ironic because it didn't just
When
like
you're 40 years old, then you shouldn't be
happen
doing that.
organically. That's the thing about like saying something ironic. I don't know how you can say something ironic organically.
I don't think it can be organic.
Unless
I think it's only deliberate.
Or unless the only instance I could maybe think of something ironic happening is you ask someone a question really hoping or expecting for a certain answer, and then they tell you something organically, unaware of your intentions, that just like skewers you.
Yeah.
That might be ironic. But again, that's not by nature of the speech. It's just circumstantial.
Right.
And I think that he made a very, very good commentary on the fact that ironic, intentional irony is just lying.
Right. Yeah.
If you say things ironically, you're just lying.
Yeah.
Because you're saying things you don't mean intentionally. That's what lying is.
Yeah.
That's what sarcasm is lying, essentially.
Yes. Yeah.
That's actually, minutes ago, I was going to say one of my pet peeves is when people speak with me really ironically and I don't know them. Or not ironic, sarcastically. If someone's very sarcastic with me and I don't know them, I'm like, what kind of satanic asshole are you? Like, I have no interest in getting to know you.
Yeah.
Because you're apparently socially unaware. I get really, really angry when someone's really sarcastic with me. And I won't make his... I won't name him.
Okay.
Joe, if he listens, I'll tell him to listen just for this moment. I won't tell him the timestamp so he listens to the whole thing. The guy that came in, he was a videographer and he had the beard. Do you know him?
Yeah.
He called me the sass sponge one time. And I don't know if Joe continues to have my name in his phone as sass sponge, but it was that for a long time. Because the guy was just
sassy,
an asshole to me the whole time. And then he was just like, yeah, you're just a sass sponge. And I was like, that's not funny because I don't know you.
Yeah.
You can't be an asshole to me. If you're an asshole to me and I don't know you, it cannot be good-natured because you don't know me.
Yeah.
If you're just an asshole. Because you and I are constantly assholes to each other.
Right, yeah.
In good faith because
course,
we know
right.
each other and we know how to do that. But when you're not, when you're just sarcastic with me.
Were you being sassy to him that day?
No. It's horrible. Because every time he came in, I'm like, don't talk to me.
It's funnier because I know him.
Like, don't talk to me.
He's such a dick. Yeah.
But he's not funny. He's just mean. Which, I mean, I guess itself is funny. But, like, he's not witty. He's just mean.
Yeah,
and then he makes, like, a sass sponge. Like, okay, so I'm just a punching bag? Like, what do you mean, sass sponge?
Yeah, he's pretty cold in his delivery and everything.
It's very annoying. I
haven't seen him in a long time.
Yeah. Maybe he's dead.
I know he moved, like, to Seattle or something. Yeah.
Gag.
It's not surprising.
Cooked in Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
You know what's really interesting is in the book, sorry, I'm changing gears. In the book, he referenced Hail Caesar, the Coen Brothers movie.
Yes.
And I was, like, shocked that I'd seen it.
Who's shocked that you've seen it?
I was shocked. I was like, wow, I've seen this movie. That one was not it was not a hit.
Mm-hmm. I know.
He did kind of lambast people who were easily swayed by communist thought in the 1950s and 60s in Hollywood and stuff. But I was just like, wow, I've actually seen this and I know what he's talking about. And I have all the scenes in my head and stuff. It's very rare that someone makes kind of a mildly obscure film reference and I know what they're talking about. I thought that was cool. Oh, there was one pun he made in the part where he's talking about, what was her name? It's not Hirsch. She's one of the major feminist figures of the 1970s. That was another thing that I think that they're like when he makes comments about how Simone de Beauvoir essentially wanted to invert the relationship of the feminine and the masculine and stuff. He could have just talked about that for a while, but he didn't.
Right, yeah.
Because he has I don't know if it was a content tender thing or not. Again, I don't know. I don't know what the behind the scenes of this is, so I don't want to say. It's not his intellect, because he's very intelligent.
Yes, yeah.
Knowles was, he was picking up on the right things. Every single thing, I'm like, okay, yes, I get, you're on the right track, but just not following it to its logical end. But he made a thing where they were talking about how they would get together for what they would call political therapy or politotherapy, where they would get together and like drink wine and stuff and like bitch at each other like women, and somehow that was like political action. And he called it their wine and cheese soirees, but it was wine, like a whining woman instead of wine. So they're wine and cheese soirees. I was like, Michael, you're such an idiot. It's such a dumb joke, but I thought it was so funny in the moment because it was the most like Michael Knowles joke of the entire thing. Wine and cheese soiree.
You could just imagine his cheesy smile as he's writing.
No. When he would go into his ad reads and he'd be like, wow, that was a really good transition. I did not know about the attempt to change the spelling of woman.
I didn't either, actually.
And then I looked it up and it's real.
I know, yeah. I did too.
Feminist circles in the 80s and 90s were
Yeah.
were actually attempting to change the way that woman was spelled to omit man and men.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So women was WIMMIN. There was
Yeah, but that didn't catch
WOMYN, WMIN. I didn't know that because I didn't catch on. I never knew about it.
Yeah.
Well, that was kind of cool. That I was like, oh, I didn't know any of that ever happened.
Oh, I know me either.
I would say, okay. So another thing he was talking about. He had a whole spiel on like the right to privacy. And I didn't know what you thought about that because we've never talked about that before.
Right, yeah.
Whether or not people have a right to privacy. What do you think of? Because I know that what I really liked is anytime he would talk about a Supreme Court case, he'd go, they found the theretofore unknown constitutional right to this thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Like how they kept discovering
Yeah.
fake rights to things.
Yeah.
Like to abortion and on-demand divorce and stuff. Like, so anyway, the right to privacy was kind of...
I guess I just don't think we have any rights at all, and so
Yeah.
the only rights are the ones given by the government. I think I just don't think there's anything in.
Like if the government tells you we're not going to go into your stuff, okay, then I have a right to privacy.
Yes, exactly.
But
yeah.
if then they go, well, now we're going to look at your stuff, it's like, okay, now I don't have a right to privacy. I'm like,
yes, yeah.
whether or not you like that is a
it's
issue.
a difference, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
But any claim of like an inherent right, I just think it comes from flawed Protestant principles, and so I just don't really adhere to any rights whatsoever.
Which we talked about before.
Yeah. Which again, I think is just my generic issue with many conservative thinkers in general, is that they try to appeal to that every time, and it's never really a proper argument at all. It's like, okay, well, yeah, that is what they thought, but okay.
Like, yeah, it's an appeal to tradition or something, isn't it?
Yeah, I think you're wrong.
I think my favorite line of the whole thing, and it's not a complex line. I just think that it what are you checking?
Just the time.
Are you good?
Yeah.
The line that I think most delivered to me that with which I was able to connect ideologically, something that's important to me, is when he said, "Choice will not suffice to save the Western mind." I was like, I had to sit back for a second. I was like, okay, you could have just written that sentence, and not published a book, and that would have been enough for me. Because that's something, like the contemporary notion of freedom is something that I'm really concerned with, and like I hate Bentley Hart now, but
yeah.
after the email he sent me, believe me, I don't think we'd get along. But he emailed me. I've been emailed by David Bentley Hart. Just to rub it into people who faces who know who that is. But I will get Chomsky on the show if you want. Chomsky will come on.
So we could
Beat up an old man over Zoom. He's like, and then his nurse comes in to give him this bottle. But choice will not suffice to save the Western mind. So the thesis of the whole thing, I think, is summed up in the line: the right to speak means nothing to those who have nothing to say. I think it's like one of the first lines in the thing.
Yeah.
I think it's the end of the preface is like the last line.
Yeah.
And then right in the end, he makes another line kind of like that.
Yeah.
And I think that's true, obviously, is that if you don't have anything of meaning to say, don't say it. Like what do you mean? Like, there's no, the end is not the right to speak. It's the saying the right thing.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that he knows that. And he had little lines like that throughout the thing.
Right. Yeah.
And I don't think the book focused on that.
Yes. Yeah.
I think it was just a correct but to me unsatisfactory explanation of the point, and then examples.
I don't think just to you. I think in general. It didn't. Yeah, I think it didn't go to the heart of the problem, which I would say you could, if you're going to make a historical argument, you should trace it back to Albigensianism and Protestantism.
Which he didn't do sufficiently, and he
Yes.
didn't do in a way that people who aren't in the know would understand.
Yeah.
He gave us the nod
Yes.
at
Yeah.
the very end.
Yeah. But
Then
he
I got a
talked,
little
he
bit
talked
excited.
more about the Frankfurt School than he did. I think everything that
Albigensian,
came before. Yeah.
Marcuse, and
Yeah.
who is important, but
Exactly.
it's not.
Yeah. All those things were important, but I think obviously there's something intrinsic. There's an idea intrinsic that lies beneath that, and that the arguments could have been made stronger if he did some strong deductive arguments for the nature of proposition speech. In general, I think those are just my two overall. I think ideas that could have, like if you had an editor that simply said, like, a lot of this content is good, but these are the missing pieces that you need to just include in here. It didn't even have to be that much longer. Probably maybe one more chapter, but
Just tie up at the end.
yeah, just
Because his
type in there.
conclusion wasn't really a conclusion; it was like a rehashing.
Right, yeah. Which normally conclusions are. I mean, it's a restatement of your thesis.
But there wasn't, for the second half, there wasn't really a thesis. It was just a description. And I
Yes,
think
yeah.
that he just ends up describing. And I don't think that's him.
Yeah, I think that's what I texted you at some point. I was like, I really
You
just
think he had an editor? Who
Yeah,
was,
I think it's an editor issue.
Yeah.
I think many times
He's made better points than that on the show.
yes, yeah,
And he has the skill in writing to make the points better than he does in the show. And
Yeah.
That's kind of what I was expecting.
yeah. And I think
But it was a pleasant read. I'm not
course,
mad
yeah.
that I read it.
No, I think anybody who hasn't read it should read it. I think it's a good read, and you're going to get a lot of information historically, and good citations and everything. That is definitely worth a read. But
We're also like autistic people who
I know. Yes, I would just encourage more. It's like it's just.
maybe he'll put I don't know.
Yeah, that's all. Like again, like
It feels like the first fourth of a book.
yes, yeah,
Like pick a third of the strongest examples, make that the first third or something,
Yeah.
and then expand the first third of the book for the 2/3,
yeah,
and actually make a strong argument.
yes,
Because that's really was my impression at the end of it. Is like I don't really know what substantive argument was being made
exactly yeah.
beyond what everybody kind of already.
Yeah, and I do think that that's a basic intuition that you get in there, and again, if you're like an editor or somebody handed this to you, I think that's probably what you would have said. It's like, yeah, but what is your point?
Yeah.
Right, and I think that's why I was texting to you. I was like, because I got many papers like from students and everything. That's my main thing. Was like, what's your point? Why?
Yeah.
You make this case, okay? Why? You can't just say it and then give historical context, but but why is this wrong?
Like for example, when he the thing I agree with him wholeheartedly when he on his show he's talking about it, he's like no, cancel culture is good if you mean censoring bad ideas.
I completely
And then you
agree,
go,
yes.
Okay, why?
Yes,
Like,
okay,
I just want to hear you talk about why you say that.
Yes,
because I
well,
understand, especially when you're on a show for an hour,
Yes,
you can't.
you can't. Yeah, but in a book,
In a book that's 250 pages long,
Yeah.
just talk about that or
Yeah.
something.
yeah, you could have just narrowed it down to that, and that could have been an entire book.
Or irony, or
Yes, yeah.
or euphemisms, or any.
Yeah,
I don't know.
and the one thing I normally also tell others papers who I read or grade or whatever is just take a tip from Aquinas. Always begin with the opposition, because if you
Which I think that this is what this is.
yes,
I think it is beginning with the opposition, but it doesn't go.
yes,
beyond.
but he doesn't spell it out as strong as he could have. It's like the opposition. Like he talks about the what were the libertarians and all stuff, but he
He
doesn't
like libertarians.
I know he doesn't.
Which
yeah.
I enjoy.
Which I don't. I don't
I
either.
Get,
yes,
I get it.
but I want to know the reasons why, and
just make it a book. Just make it an anti-libertarian book or whatever.
yeah, exactly, yeah, and
But I think it being marketable, you can't do that.
Yes. Yeah.
Which, in his position, I empathize with that.
I do too. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah,
Again,
but-
I enjoyed it. It's worth reading. But I don't know. I don't. I think
Interesting
that,
cover.
Oh, I like the art.
Yeah.
I just, and again, we're more. I'll just be kind of what's the word? Self-flattering for both of us in a way that we have thought more about this than the vast majority of people.
Right. Yeah.
So this was not written for us.
Yeah.
So any potential criticism we might have is beyond, like, most of this people don't know. Like, it's worth reading
It is. Yes.
for
yeah.
most people.
Yeah.
And it will point you in the right direction, but it is not. It's not the thesis you need to hear. It's essentially like handing you the compass in a way
Yeah.
to understand that the right is also wrong.
Yes.
Which
yeah.
is kind of the thesis.
Which is good. Yes.
Which is true.
Yeah.
Like the American right. That's actually one point that I think would be worth discussing really quick. Is he makes the point that leftists understand the nature of speech way better than conservatives do.
Yes. Yeah.
But he doesn't really expand on it. But I think that could be the main thesis of the book.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that conservatives is hard for me to say, but like
I know, but-
American conservatives
Yeah.
in a contemporary context do not understand the way that speech works.
Yeah.
And leftists do.
Because many of them have accepted the libertarian idea.
Which is that speech doesn't work anyway.
Yes,
Any way or not.
Right, yeah, that we should just be left alone to dictate what is proper speech or not.
Which is properly anarchy.
Yes, it is, yeah.
And I actually like anarchists better than like libertarians, because libertarians are just half-baked anarchists. And I know
Right,
we've
yes,
talked about
yeah.
that before. But
yeah. Yeah, and again, I think a lot of his statements and a lot of his examples are good, but I think it does go. It just simply goes back to the nature of speech. Is that speech?
And when you name a book Speechless, I'm
Yes.
kind of expecting a
Yeah.
treatise on the nature of speech.
Yeah, the
and
nature
that's
of-
not what it was.
It wasn't. Yeah,
It was a chronology.
It would always require. It's the same thing that he got into a little bit with talks about open-mindedness, and I've said this since I was like
what's
18
the
years
word?
old, 18, 19 years old.
Academic
Yeah.
freedom or something.
Yeah, and academic freedom.
Yeah.
That some like academic freedom really does come from a Protestant background, and he touches upon that, which I wish he did more. But like the idea of open-mindedness, yeah, that doesn't exist. In order to be open-minded, it means you're closer to closed-minded, and it's a reality that must be, and because again, the nature of propositions is the negation of its contradiction, and you cannot hold every position.
That's kind of
as
what we
true.
were saying at the beginning. Is that
It
when
is,
you
yeah.
say something, you are excluding its
You are.
opposite, or it's
Yeah.
it's contradicting.
Yeah, because
Statement or whatever.
prior to any historical context of what the founding fathers thought about freedom of speech or the conservative worldview of speech, before any of that, the ontological reality of speech is the negation of its contradiction. That you cannot hold P and not P
The
at the
wall
same
can't
time.
be red and yellow at the same time.
Yes, yeah, or red and not red at the same time.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't make any sense. It is either the case that it is that or not, and so that inherently, of course, there's always going to be a limit to speech. And so then, what should be the desideratum?
And that's the
It's
kind
true.
of the thesis of the book,
It is,
but
yes.
it isn't made clearly
It isn't, yes,
in the way that when I finish the book, it's
Yeah.
not clear that that's what he's saying.
yeah.
But
And he said
knowing him,
he
at
did in
least
the end
there's-
say that he could write a separate book on the prescription of what should be the case, but
that's why I know that's the book that should be written.
yes, but even if it isn't, he could have simply just easily stated the desideratum of speech should be truth. That's it.
Which he knows, and he says all the time.
Yes.
So it was a little weird. I think the dissonance I encountered with it was that I hear him make these arguments all the time.
Yeah.
But then his book is extrapolations on historical like a
Which is
very
great, yes.
very well written and specific and what's the word, expansive history of political correctness in the U.S.
Yes.
But he didn't make any of the arguments he normally makes
Yeah.
stronger.
Yes. Yeah.
That's kind of, to me, what a book would be about.
Yes.
If you were going to release a book, like if we were going to write a Contra Gentiles book, we would write
Yeah.
a volume expanding on something we've said.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's, I don't want to say worth reading, that because this is worth reading.
Yeah.
But that makes sense to have released in a way.
Yeah. I would agree.
And again, it's like it's not that it's not worth reading because I enjoyed it a lot and I actually learned a lot of historical details
exactly,
about
yeah.
the history of Marxism in the U.S. like political
Yeah.
correctness and the way that speech, like specifics of the way that speech has been censored. But I wasn't really looking for that. Most people are.
Yeah.
So I think that we're a specific case. Again, we might really just sound autistic and like out of touch saying this to most people. We're like, no. We don't need the
Most people
example.
are like, "What do you mean the nature of language?"
We're like, no, we know about the COVID thing. We know about the campus
way
assault
that they
thing.
try and
We
control,
know about the
yeah.
campus speech thing. We know about all that.
Yeah.
What does it mean?
Yeah.
And I really think that Michael Knowles is quite capable of explaining what it means.
I do too, yeah.
Kind of just like,
And I do agree with him that deserves its own book. That's fine. But I think rather than prefacing, because towards the end he kind of prefaced some ideas. It's like, well, yeah, but you're still not. It's a very simple statement. Speech should be dictated by what is true. That's it.
Yeah.
Right now, how we're going to practically implement that's something that has to be a stronger discussion. But ultimately, that if he is talking about how political correct speech is a lie, and then that's a strong statement to make. And so
because he makes the case, it's like this, like
exactly.
same-sex marriage is politically correct.
Yes.
And in being politically correct, one of the features of political correct, I don't remember what the phrase. There's like the guy.
Which he makes a very strong case for.
Very
right?
strong
Yes.
case.
And
he
it's
gives
great.
example after example
Yes,
that like when
that
when
it
it's
is
a politically
inherently a lie.
correct phrase, handy capable is a lie. Same-sex
Yes.
marriage is self-contradictory.
Yes.
It makes all of these claims of self-contradictory statements
And so
that
another-
characterize politically correct
Yes.
thought. And it's like, just talk about that.
Yes, and that even though it deserves another book, that a simple
Right,
statement
yeah.
that then correct speech is dictated by truth. So if false speech is dictated by lies, then correct speech should be dictated by truth.
So let's, for the last little bit, we're over 2 hours, which I really am glad that we got 2 hours out of this. I was kind of, sometimes when we discuss like specific work, we get like bored. And
Yeah,
we're just
yeah,
like,
yeah.
But this is, I think there's a lot to unpack with that.
Yeah.
But what were we talking about? Damn it, I forgot it again. It's a thought I had while I was reading it. What were you just saying?
Oh, just that.
Oh, okay, I got it. I was actually talking to somebody about this today. One of the Slurp Gang guys. The anarchists, sorry, guys. We're trashing anarchists all the time. I love all of you individually. I think you're misguided. We can talk about it later. I love you. But is that I don't know how long it's been the case, but contemporary philosophy is content with the specific and not universal. There's no discussion of universal truth or anything.
Yes, yeah.
It's not because what is the word philosophy derives from what again exactly?
Philosophia, the love of wisdom.
Yeah, just wisdom.
2 words, yeah.
Or like theology's theos, theoste, whatever.
Yeah,
It's like
spoken word of theos.
yeah, the end of truth, that which is the end of, or knowledge, the end of knowledge, or whatever. That's what philosophy used to be. And it seems like I don't know exactly where the line can be drawn, and I don't know if you could.
Yeah, you can.
Is that, well, most philosophy is like, okay, knowledge, okay. And then they pick knowledge, and then they devise an ideology
Yes.
contingent on knowledge being the basis of reality, because philosophy is fundamentally seeking of the universal and transcendent. But if you don't actually seek the transcendent, you focus on the specific, and that almost kind of is what happened here. Is that it's like the goal isn't to extrapolate universal truth or like reach the root of all that is,
Yeah.
or knowledge or truth or whatever. You just like when people talk about Heidegger or something, Heidegger is literally, it's just phenomenology. It's just like he picks experience as a
Yes.
thing he understands well and can write about, and then devises a way to concoct a system of philosophy that bases reality on the thing that he knows how to talk about.
Yeah, yeah. I like the way you.
I think that's
That would piss off so many Heideggerians.
no, that's what it is. Is Heidegger?
Yeah, yeah.
Heidegger understood the way.
No, I agree with you.
No, I know, but let me try to word it again. So, like, Heidegger was very, very. He was acutely aware, and intelligently so, of the way that people experience the world and the nature of experience.
Yeah.
And instead of using that as a starting point that would refer to something beyond itself, he knows how to write about it, so he's going to construct his entire philosophy about something he knows how to write about.
Yeah.
That's kind of what, or like Foucault is like sexuality. Obviously, Foucault is very, very aware of the mechanics of sexuality, so he bases his entire philosophy around. He's good at writing and sex. Like that's like self language and sex. That's it's just like that's all of contemporary philosophy is for at least a couple hundred years.
More than that, but yeah.
Like Marx is very acutely aware of obviously we have.
Well, I think a lot of them simply accepted the thesis of Kant. As well as David Hume kind of said.
What is it? That phenomenon is the basis, like experience is the basis
was
of
that you
reality
can
or
never, through reason, come to know and understand theological and
and
metaphysical
is that
principles.
because of the nature of your finite
Yes.
finite perception as a human being, or what?
Yeah, and so like he it isn't so much that he denied the reality of metaphysics, like I think called that the noumenal world, and as opposed to the phenomenological world, or maybe that's writings of him that say that, but that the noumenal world in essence can only really be understood as synthetic a priori knowledge as opposed to
and that's all that can be known,
all that can be known, right?
which is a misunderstanding of what it means to know something. But
Yeah, I know, yes.
one of our,
And so I think
justified true belief is one of our
fundamentally-
catchphrases.
I think most contemporary philosophers after Kant simply accepted that principle, that you cannot know universal principles.
So what I know
It's
for
only
me
through
must be the
experience.
basis of philosophy. So I'm
Yeah.
just going to write what I know,
Yes, what your experience.
and which is why none of it is complete.
Yeah, exactly.
None of it.
Yeah.
So a lot of it speaks to an element of the truth.
Yes, yeah.
Almost Nietzsche, I think, was insane. I don't think there's very few thinkers like Nietzsche that I think were just incorrect in most ways. Like Foucault was correct about things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Heidegger was correct about things.
Yeah.
Kant was correct about things.
I think
as much
the one thing, honestly, that Nietzsche was really, really correct about was actually quite a few things. I do think that the experience of fallen man really is this desire for power.
Oh yeah,
And
oh
this
yeah,
way-
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
shouldn't say desire,
That's
but it's a
that's
will.
existentialism in general.
Yes,
It's like,
yeah,
I think
yeah.
the existentialists were very, very in tune with it means to experience suffering.
Yes, yeah.
But they don't make it's so what the existentialists they're a very, very loose group of people.
Yes.
They're it's essentially people all writing at the same time is about as loose as the connection. Like
Yeah. No, that is true, though. And,
like
yeah,
Dostoevsky and Nietzsche have almost like nothing in common.
know,
at all.
yes,
There's
yeah.
nothing in common about them.
it is, and yes.
But they were writing at the same time about suffering.
So they're still constituted as existentialists.
They should almost call them like existentialist is a bad word. That was concocted later
It was, yeah.
by a lot.
Yeah.
Like Camus
know,
and
yeah.
Sartre
Yeah.
have nothing to
yeah.
do. Kierkegaard has nothing to do with Sartre.
Yes, yeah.
They're all just talking about like responses to suffering. They're all talking about the
Yeah.
way in which people react to suffering and the proper
Yeah.
ways to do that.
I mean,
they don't.
in technical terms, the reason why they call them existentialists is because they believe that existence preceded essence, and so there was this.
Oh, I see what you mean now.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then that's really how they categorize them.
Which is
as.
very phenomenological. It's
It
very
is,
much
yes,
very-
yeah. Existentialism and phenomenology is very close together,
Mm-hmm.
but phenomenology even denies existence, and they only they begin with the starting point of the phenomena of existing, as opposed to
Was Heidegger an attempt to kind of reconcile that with Aristotelian thought? Or something? I know that he was.
Oh, yeah, because he was studying to be a priest and everything. So I think he definitely encountered Aquinas and everything. He wasn't ignorant to it.
Because when you read it, I think that Heidegger is some of the most coherent. I don't think it's coherent. It's incoherent. It's unfinished.
Yeah.
But I think that it was the beginnings of what was to be the most coherent philosophy of the time. I think that's why it connects with people.
It is, yeah. And I think he was
read Aristotle.
Yes.
Just if you're into Heidegger, read Aristotle.
And I think Heidegger was very, very influenced by Meister Eckhart, who was that Christian mystic and everything. And so it's that's really the only thing that connects the existentialists. But you're right, the conclusions are
they're all concerned with suffering and experience.
They are, yes.
A lot of what is it? Camus, Sartre, and Kierkegaard are like the triad of what the ways. There's like leap of faith, there's absurdity, and nihilism or something.
Yes,
There's like but the one of the characterizing.
The other thing that also connects all of them is a misunderstanding of existing.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Well, just of the times, like it's just they're kind of contextually predisposed to that. But my point is that all of them, even Dostoevsky. I think Dostoevsky he's a novelist. He's not as much. I mean, Camus was a novelist also. I don't know if he wrote any essays. I know Sartre wrote essays and stuff, but
Sartre wrote essays. Yeah. But Camus,
I think Camus was just a novelist.
Yeah, just a novelist. Yeah.
Dostoevsky was like actually kind of clinically insane, and like it has a whole different thing.
Like
but
all the existentialists.
Yeah, they all have like mental health issues, if that exists at all.
Philosophy of the insane.
It's existentialism. I guess why it connects with young men.
Yeah.
The problem is they all were very acutely aware and capable of describing certain ways in which people react to suffering and the fact that they exist, or like conceptualizing how existence feels, but they didn't do anything beyond that.
Yeah,
they just describe a thing. Like philosophy is purely descriptive now. It's not like the greatest like a Curtis Yarvin. He just kind of describes the circumstances of being, or our political circumstances, or the way in which we are now. But there's not a whole lot of prescriptive writing of like, and that means this.
Yes.
That's not how philosophy is written, which means it's not philosophy really.
Yeah. There's no wisdom to really be gained.
Yeah. Well, there's no wisdom attempted.
Yes.
It's just it's just description, which is.
And I do think the intuition of the existentialists, and this is what I do like about the existentialists, is that I think their intuition is correct in that all this, like 500 years, or 400 years, I guess, for the early existentialists, but 500 years of writings in philosophy was all bullshit. And I think that is what they recognize.
That's all you have access to. That would mean that all meaning is bullshit.
Yes, because when they saw that, they were like, well, none of this really is correct. None of this means anything.
It refers to nothing.
Yes, it was like it was a keen intuition on the problem of theodicy by removing God.
Which is another.
Suffering,
It's another. Yeah, I was going to say suffering. It's another way of saying.
It really does go back to that because every other explanation that came from the Protestants and from every philosophy after Protestantism was lacking for them, and they don't understand the nature of being. The one who understood it the closest really was Nietzsche, especially in his description when he said, God is dead and we have killed him. What will happen of the ocean? Will it cease to be? What happens to the air? Will we just whatever? It was like he understood that by eliminating being, you eliminate everything. You eliminate morality. You eliminate.
We should cover Nietzsche, I think.
Yeah, we could. Yeah, he's one of the philosophers I read like a lot of his works.
Yeah, we should pick one and go.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're hitting 2:15.
All right, I think we're good.
We have covered Speechless, Controlling Words,
Controlling
Ding Ding. By Michael. No one's going to know what that is. There's 5 people who listen to know what that is. The stupid Ding Ding. It's very much worth reading. I think that it is unique and special in a contemporary context. I think he says a lot of things that nobody else says.
I think people really should pick it up because it's going to really open their their understanding of the immediate historical consequences of what Marxism really did.
It'll give you it's a lot of mechanical historical context, and he does provide context to events that have occurred very recently that we might not have had, and contextualize them in like what it means as a result of what happened before. But I think our main takeaway is that that's kind of all it is.
Yeah.
And maybe put a link to this in the back cover or something. It's like an addendum or something. It needs quite a bit more, or pick a point to be made, like whether it's irony or euphemism or whatever. Like in that first third is very good.
Yes, yeah.
Makes things I didn't think of, like the irony thing, especially like the irony being a sign of decadent culture and stuff. Is like actually like extremely profound. Yeah. And insightful. I think that's good.
Yes. Definitely.
But yeah, I enjoyed it.
Me too.
Ding ding. But yeah, I guess that can be it. We can be done.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.